The bitter cold of Ares 9 seeped through Major Alara Voss's thermal suit as she knelt before grave marker 3197. The crimson twilight cast long shadows across the vast memorial field, turning the metallic headstones into silhouettes of the fallen. Her blue-tinged fingers traced the engraved name, Captain Saul Renard, hero of the Red Dawn battle. 7 years had passed since that fateful day. 7 years of nightmares of replaying those final moments when she had to choose between saving her squadron or going back for Saul. 7 years of the same dream, his voice crackling over the comm system, telling her to leave him behind as enemy fire surrounded his position. "I should have come back for you," Alara whispered, her voice hoarse from the planet's thin atmosphere. "I'm sorry I didn't save you." The military cemetery stretched for kilometers in every direction, each marker bearing the scars of the greatest conflict the Galactic Federation had ever known. 30,000 soldiers lay beneath the rusty soil of Ares 9, their bodies preserved by the planet's unique mineral composition. 30,000 stories of bravery, sacrifice, and loss. But only one haunted Alara Voss every waking moment. The setting sun painted the sky in violent purples and deep reds, a daily reminder of the bloodshed that had occurred here. Alara placed her hand flat against the cold metal of Sol's marker, feeling the etchings that detailed his final mission. The official record stated he died, protecting the eastern flank during the battle's final hours, but she knew differently. She had heard his last words had promised to tell his family the truth. A truth that had been classified and buried deeper than his empty coffin. A metallic sound clinked behind her so faint she almost missed it over the howling desert wind. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The cemetery was supposed to be empty at this hour, the automated defense systems activating after sunset to prevent looters from desecrating the graves. Alara's hand instinctively moved toward the pulse pistol at her hip. 7 years as a fugitive had taught her to trust her instincts. She remained still, listening intently, her enhanced hearing, searching for another sound amidst the whistling wind. There it was again, a boot scraping against stone. In one fluid motion, she spun around, drawing her weapon and aiming it at the source of the sound. The figure standing 10 meters away wore battle armor that had been officially decommissioned after the war. Its design was unmistakable, the reinforced chest plate with the distinctive burn mark on the left shoulder, the helmet with its unique visor pattern that allowed for enhanced peripheral vision. It was Saul Renard's armor. "Who are you?" Alara demanded, her finger hovering over the trigger. "That armor belongs to a dead man." The figure raised its hand slowly, then reached up to remove the helmet. The faceplate hissed as the seal broke, and the helmet came off to reveal a face Alara had seen countless times in her nightmares. It was impossible. She had watched his position get overrun, had heard his final transmission, had attended his funeral. Yet here, he stood older with a scar running from his left temple down to his jaw, but unmistakably Saul Renard. "Hello, Alara," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. "It's been a long time." Before she could respond, a loud siren wailed across the cemetery. The automated defense system was activating. In less than 3 minutes, the entire area would be patrolled by armed drones, programmed to shoot any unauthorized visitors on sight. "We need to leave, now." Sul replaced his helmet and gestured toward the eastern perimeter. "There's a breach in the fence where we can get out." Alara kept her weapon trained on him. "You're dead. I watched you die." "No time to explain," he said, the urgency in his voice breaking through her shock. "In exactly 90 seconds, those Iron Watch drones will sweep this section. If you want answers, you need to come with me." The rational part of her brain screamed that this was a trap, yet something deeper, something she couldn't explain, made her lower her weapon. If this was an imposter, they had gone to extraordinary lengths. And if it truly was Sol... The first drone appeared over the horizon, its searchlight cutting through the darkening sky. "Fine," she said, holstering her pistol. "But I want answers." They sprinted across the cemetery, weaving between markers, using the growing darkness as cover. Sol moved with familiar precision, leading them toward a section where the perimeter fence had been damaged by recent sandstorms. The drone's searchlight swept across the ground behind them, getting closer with each pass. As they reached the fence, Sol produced a small device that emitted an electromagnetic pulse, temporarily disabling the fence's security features. He pulled back a section of the mesh, creating an opening just large enough for them to slip through. Once outside, they didn't stop running until they reached a concealed rover, half buried in the sand dunes a kilometer away. Sol brushed away the sand and opened the vehicle's hatch. "Get in," he ordered, climbing into the driver's seat. Alara hesitated only briefly before joining him. The rover's engine came to life with a low hum, and they sped off into the desert, leaving the cemetery and its patrols behind. For several minutes, neither spoke. Alara studied his profile in the dim light of the rover's control panel. He drove with the same confidence she remembered handling the vehicle over the rough terrain with practiced ease. It was surreal, sitting beside a ghost watching him perform mundane tasks, as if the past 7 years had never happened. "Are you going to explain?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "Or should I just assume you're a clone sent to mess with my head?" Sol's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Not a clone. It's really me, Alara." "That's impossible. I heard your last transmission. Your position was overrun." "It was," he confirmed, keeping his eyes on the barren landscape ahead. "But I wasn't killed. I was captured." "By whom the war ended 3 days after that battle." "By people who wanted the war to continue," he said, cryptically. "People who had invested too much in the conflict to let it end." Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. "The Ghost Legion," she whispered. The rumors were true. The Ghost Legion was a whispered myth among veterans, a supposed Black Ops division that operated outside official military channels. Stories claimed they were behind various atrocities during the war, false flag operations designed to prolong the fighting. Most dismissed them as conspiracy theories. "They're real," Sol confirmed. "And they've been operating with the blessing of certain high-ranking officials within the Empire." "So what are you now, their agent?" "No." His voice hardened. "I'm what you might call a deep cover operative. After I was captured, I managed to convince them I would be more valuable alive than dead. I've spent the last 7 years infiltrating their network, gathering evidence of their operations. And they just believed you, just like that." "Not just like that. I spent 2 years in their conditioning program." The way he said the word made it clear what he meant. Torture, brainwashing. "But I had something to hold on to that kept me sane." "What was that?" He glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the dashboard lights. "The promise I made to you, that I'd find a way back." Alara looked away, unwilling to let him see how deeply his words affected her. "So, why reveal yourself now after 7 years?" "Because I finally have enough evidence to bring down not just the Ghost Legion, but the entire corrupt leadership that created them, including the man who ordered my death and used it as propaganda to rally support for the final push." "Who?" "Commander Draco Valen." Alara's blood ran cold. Draco Valen, the war hero, the man who had personally awarded her the Medal of Valor for her actions during the battle, where Sol had supposedly died. The man who had risen to become the head of the Federation Security Council after the war. "That's a serious accusation," she said carefully. "I know. That's why I need your help." He steered the rover into a narrow canyon, hidden from aerial surveillance. "I can't do this alone, and you're one of the few people I can trust." "How do I know you're really Sol?" she challenged. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate setup?" He stopped the rover and turned to face her fully. "Ask me something only the real Sol would know." Alara thought for a moment, then said, "The night before the Red Dawn battle, what did you tell me?" "That if we survived, I was going to retire and build that cabin we always talked about on the lakes of Nebulan 5. His expression softened. "And I asked if you would consider joining me there." "What was my answer?" She pressed her heart pounding. "You said you needed time to think about it. That you weren't sure if you were ready to leave military life behind. He paused. And then I told you that I'd wait however long it took because some things are worth waiting for. The words hit her like a physical blow. No one else could have known about that conversation. It had happened in private, away from recording devices or witnesses. "It's really you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's really me," he confirmed. Alara allowed herself a moment to absorb this reality, then compartmentalized her emotions, as she'd been trained to do. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What exactly is your plan, and what do you need from me?" "I need access to the central archives in Bazaar City. I have most of the evidence compiled, but there's a keystone file that would link everything together, prove that Draco ordered not just my death, but the deaths of hundreds of others who knew too much. The archives are heavily guarded. How do you propose we get in?" "With your clearance. You're still listed as a tactical advisor to the Council, aren't you?" Alara raised an eyebrow. "You seem well informed for someone who's been dead." "I make it my business to know things," he replied, with a hint of the old soul's confidence. "Your credentials were never revoked even after you started asking uncomfortable questions about what happened during the battle. Draco didn't want to draw attention to you by officially dismissing you. He thought it would be less suspicious to keep you close under surveillance. And how do you suggest we deal with that surveillance when we walk into the most secure facility on Ares 9? Saul reached behind his seat and pulled out a small metal case. Opening it, revealed a collection of devices Alara didn't recognize. Ghost Legion technology. It can create a temporary blind spot in any security system. Will be invisible for exactly 17 minutes once activated. 17 minutes to get in, find the file, and get out. It won't be easy, he acknowledged. But I know exactly where to look. With your clearance getting us in the door, and my intel directing us once we're inside, we can do this. Alara considered her options. If Sol was telling the truth, this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. A chance to expose the corruption she'd suspected for years. If he was lying, well, she'd been living on borrowed time since she started asking questions about his death. "Where are we heading now?" she asked. "A safe house about 50 kilometers from here. We'll rest, go over the plan in detail, and move on Bazaar City tomorrow night." "One more question," Alara said. "Why didn't you contact me sooner? 7 years, Saul. 7 years of believing I failed you." Pain flashed across his features. "I couldn't risk it. They were watching you too closely at first. And later, when I was deeper in Ghost Legion, any contact with you would have blown my cover and signed both our death warrants." He reached out, as if to touch her hand, then pulled back. "Believe me, Alara, there wasn't a day that went by when I didn't think about reaching out." She wanted to believe him. More than anything, she wanted this miracle to be real. But 7 years of suspicion and survival had taught her caution. "We'll see," she said, neither accepting nor rejecting his explanation. "Right now, let's focus on the mission." Saul nodded, respecting her boundaries, and started the rover again. As they traveled deeper into the desert, Alara watched the stars emerge in the clear sky above. For the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. The safe house was hidden in a canyon network protected from both the elements and detection. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a natural rock formation, but as Saul activated a concealed panel, a doorway appeared in the stone face. Inside was a surprisingly well-equipped bunker, communications equipment, weapons supplies, and even some modest living quarters. "Ghost Legion facility?" Alara asked, surveying the space. "Originally, yes. I've repurposed it." Sewell removed his armor, revealing civilian clothes underneath. "There's food in the storage unit if you're hungry." Alara hadn't realized how famished she was until he mentioned it. While she prepared a simple meal from the rations, Sewell set up a holographic display in the center of the room. "This is the archive center in Bazaar," he explained, as a 3-dimensional model of the building materialized. "Main entrance here, security checkpoints here and here." He pointed to different sections of the model. Your credentials will get us past the outer security, but we'll need to use the Ghost Legion tech to bypass the inner checkpoints. What exactly are we looking for once we're inside? A sealed file codenamed Lazarus Protocol. It contains detailed orders from Draco to the Ghost Legion, including the names of soldiers targeted for elimination, because they knew too much about certain operations. Like you. Like me, he confirmed. And like Captain Mira Selen and about 30 others who supposedly died heroically during the final days of the war. Alara nearly dropped the food container she was holding. Mira's alive too. No, Saul said quietly. She didn't survive the conditioning, but her death wasn't the glorious last stand described in the official records. She was executed because she discovered evidence of weapons being sold to both sides of the conflict by the same corporation, a corporation Draco had significant investments in. Anger flared in Alara's chest. Mira had been her friend, a brilliant tactician who never would have made the mistakes attributed to her in the official report of her death. So Draco prolonged the war for profit, she said bitterly. How many died to line his pockets? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Sul's expression hardened. And after the war, he leveraged his heroic leadership to secure his position on the Security Council, where he's been consolidating power ever since. And no one has challenged him in 7 years. Those who tried disappeared, or were discredited. Sul manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a specific section of the archive center. The Lazarus Protocol file is stored here in a high-security data vault. With your clearance and my override codes, we can access it. Once we have it, we broadcast the contents to every major communication hub in the system. Even Draco won't be able to contain a leak of that magnitude. You make it sound simple. It won't be. The moment we access that file, alarms will trigger. That's when the 17-minute countdown becomes critical. We'll need to reach a broadcast terminal and transmit the data before security locks down the building. Alara studied the hologram, mentally calculating distances and potential obstacles. There's a communications hub 2 levels above the vault. If we can reach that, we could transmit to the entire Ares system. Exactly what I was thinking. Sul looked at her with something like pride. You haven't lost your tactical edge. Some things you don't forget, she replied, meeting his gaze. For a moment, neither spoke, the years of separation hanging between them like a physical presence. Then, Sul cleared his throat and returned his attention to the hologram. We should rest while we can. Tomorrow we'll run through the plan again, check our equipment, and prepare for every contingency we can think of. Alara nodded, suddenly aware of the exhaustion weighing on her. It had been a long day, even before her world had been turned upside down by Sul's return. There's a sleeping area through there, Saul said, pointing to a door at the back of the bunker. I'll take first watch. You don't trust me to stay, she asked, only half joking. I trust you with my life, Alara. I always have. His expression was earnest. But old habits die hard. 7 years of looking over my shoulder has made me cautious. I understand, she said, and she did. She hadn't slept through the night since the war ended, always waking at the slightest sound, ready to defend herself against unseen threats. As she made her way to the sleeping quarters, Saul called after her. Alara! She turned. Yes. Thank you for believing me, for being willing to help. She studied him for a long moment, taking in the changes 7 years had wrought, the new lines around his eyes, the scar on his face, the weight of experience evident in his posture. But underneath it all, she could still see the Saul she had known, the idealistic officer who believed in justice and honor above all else. Don't thank me yet, she said softly. We still have a long way to go. Sleep came surprisingly easily, perhaps because for the first time in years, Alara felt she was finally moving toward answers, rather than away from ghosts. When she woke, natural light was filtering through cleverly disguised vents in the ceiling, indicating it was mid-morning. She found Sul in the main room, cleaning weapons with methodical precision. You let me sleep through the night, she observed, accepting the cup of synthetic coffee he offered. You needed it, he replied simply. Besides, nothing happened worth waking you for. They spent the day fine-tuning their plan, reviewing the layout of the archive center, and preparing their equipment. Saul had an impressive array of Ghost Legion technology at his disposal: communication jammers, security bypass modules, even prototype stealth suits that could partially bend light around the wearer. "Won't they notice this equipment is missing?" Alara asked, as she examined one of the devices. "They think I died in a sandstorm 2 months ago while on a solo reconnaissance mission," Saul explained. "By the time they realized equipment was missing, they assumed it was lost with me. So you've been officially dead twice now." He smiled wryly. "It has its advantages." As evening approached, they loaded their gear into the rover and prepared to depart. The drive to Bazzara City would take approximately 3 hours, putting their arrival just after midnight, when security would be at its minimum staffing. Before they left, Saul handed Alara a small metallic object that resembled a data chip. "If anything happens to me, get this to someone you trust in the media. It contains everything I've gathered so far. Not enough to definitively prove Draco's involvement, but enough to start an investigation." Alara pocketed the chip. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Not again." His expression softened. "I've missed that determined look." The journey to Bazzara was tense but uneventful. They traveled in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, mentally preparing for what lay ahead. As the city's lights appeared on the horizon, a glowing oasis in the vast desert, Alara felt a familiar pre-mission focus settling over her. "Remember," Saul said, as they approached the city limits, "once we're inside the archive center, we'll have exactly 17 minutes from the moment we activate the security bypass. Not a second more." "I remember," she assured him. "This isn't my first high-risk operation." "No, but it might be our last if we succeed." He glanced at her. "Have you thought about what comes after if we expose Draco and bring down the Ghost Legion?" "One problem at a time," she replied, though the question had been lurking in the back of her mind. What would she do if they succeeded? What would it mean for her, for them? They left the rover in a public garage and proceeded on foot, dressed in nondescript civilian clothes, with their equipment concealed in standard-issue maintenance bags. The streets of Bazzara were nearly empty at this hour, with only the occasional security patrol to avoid. The archive center loomed ahead, its architecture a blend of functionality and intimidation. Smooth, windowless walls rising 20 stories into the night sky, with only a single obvious entrance at the front. Service entrances around the back," Saul murmured, leading the way through a series of alleyways. "Less security, and your clearance should get us through without raising alarms." The service entrance was guarded by a single bored-looking officer, who straightened as they approached. Alara presented her identification, maintaining the confident posture of someone who belonged there. "Purpose of visit?" the guard asked, scanning her credentials. "Oh, system maintenance," she replied smoothly. "We received reports of archival retrieval delays in sections 7 through 12. The guard looked skeptical. "At this hour?" "The council needs those files for a morning session," Alara said with just the right amount of exasperation. "You know how it is. They wait until the last minute, then expect miracles." The guard's expression shifted to one of understanding. "Politicians," he muttered and waved them through. Once inside, Saul led them through service corridors, avoiding the main hallways where they might encounter more personnel. When they reached a junction where a security checkpoint blocked their path, he removed one of the Ghost Legion devices from his bag. "This is it," he said quietly. "Once I activate this, we have 17 minutes. Are you ready?" Alara nodded, adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. "Do it." Saul activated the device, which emitted a soft pulse that was felt rather than heard. The indicators on the security checkpoint flickered momentarily, then returned to normal, but Saul's satisfied nod told her it had worked. They moved quickly, but calmly through the checkpoint, the guards staring straight ahead, unaware of their passage, thanks to the Ghost Legion technology, creating a blind spot in their perception. 15 minutes, Saul whispered, as they entered a high-security elevator. He inserted an override key into the control panel, giving them access to the restricted levels. The elevator descended rapidly to the archival level, a vast underground chamber filled with data storage units. Here, the physical and digital records of the entire war were kept. Everything from battle plans to casualty reports, classified operations to supply requisitions. The Lazarus Protocol should be in Section 23B, Saul said, consulting a small holographic map projected from his wrist device. This way. They navigated through the labyrinthine storage units, each moment, ticking away precious seconds of their 17-minute window. When they reached Section 23B, Saul began scanning the storage units with another device, searching for the specific encryption signature of the file they needed. Found it, he announced, after what felt like an eternity, but was actually less than 2 minutes. He connected his device to the storage unit, bypassing its security, with Ghost Legion override codes. The unit's display flickered, then presented a list of classified files. Saul selected one, labeled Lazarus P, and initiated a download to his device. 10 minutes remaining, he murmured as the download progressed. Once this completes, we head straight for the communications hub. Alara kept watch, her hand near her concealed weapon, ready to respond if they were discovered. The download seemed to take forever, the progress bar inching forward with excruciating slowness. Download complete, Saul announced finally. Let's move. They retraced their steps to the elevator, then rode it up to the level containing the communications hub. As they exited, alarms suddenly blared throughout the building. That's not supposed to happen, Saul said, his expression grim. The security bypass should have prevented any alerts. Someone must have overridden it manually, Alara surmised. Which means, they knew we were coming, Saul finished her thought. We need to hurry. They abandoned stealth for speed, sprinting down the corridor toward the communications hub. Ahead, they could see a security team assembling, preparing to block their path. We don't have time for a firefight, Alara said, assessing their options. Alternative route. Saul pointed to a maintenance access panel in the wall. Through there. It will lead to the environmental control room, which connects to the communications hub from the rear. They ducked inside just as the security team opened fire pulse rounds, impacting the wall where they had been standing moments before. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and poorly lit, forcing them to move single file, bent almost double. 5 minutes, Saul called back to her as they hurried through the cramped space. When they emerged in the environmental control room, they were confronted by 2 startled technicians. Before either could react, Alara had her weapon drawn. Don't move, she ordered. We're not here to hurt you. Against the wall, Saul directed, securing the technicians, while Alara watched the door leading to the communications hub. We just need to use your facility for a moment, then we'll be gone. Once the technicians were secured, Saul and Alara moved to the connecting door. Saul placed his hand on the control panel, but before he could activate it, the door slid open from the other side. Standing there, flanked by elite security officers, was Commander Draco Valen. Major Voss, he said, his tone almost conversational. I was wondering when you'd make your move. His gaze shifted to Saul, and his expression hardened. And the Ghost Legion deserter. I must admit I'm impressed by your persistence. It's over, Draco. Saul said, his weapon trained on the commander. We have the Lazarus Protocol files. Everything you did, the assassinations, the war, profiteering, all of it, is about to become public knowledge. Draco seemed unperturbed. Do you really think I'd leave such damning evidence where it could be found? What you've stolen is a decoy planted precisely because I anticipated this scenario. Doubt flickered across Saul's face, but he maintained his aim. You're bluffing. Am I? Draco produced a datapad and tossed it toward them. It clattered to the floor between them. See for yourself. The file is corrupted, deliberately. And now you've walked into a trap from which there is no escape. Alara kept her weapon steady, but her mind was racing. Was Draco telling the truth? Had they risked everything for nothing? Even if the file is corrupted, she said, we have enough evidence to start an investigation. People will ask questions. Questions that will be forgotten when I reveal that the notorious Ghost Legion, responsible for so many atrocities during the war, attempted to assassinate me today. Draco's smile was cold. Fortunately, my loyal security team prevented the attack, killing the assassins in the process. Public opinion will rally behind me, and any accusations you might have made will be dismissed as the desperate fabrications of terrorists. You won't get away with this, Saul growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. I already have, Draco replied calmly. You see, the moment you entered this building, you were cut off from any outside communication. The stolen Ghost Legion technology you're using has been modified. It doesn't create a security blind spot. It creates a containment field. Nothing gets in or out, not communications, not data, not you. Alara glanced at Sul, seeing in his expression that Draco's words had struck home. The technology had been compromised. They were trapped. Now, Draco continued, you have a choice. Surrender, and perhaps we can discuss terms. Resist, and my security team will be forced to eliminate you. The security officers raised their weapons, waiting for Draco's command. It was a hopeless situation. Even if they managed to overcome Draco and his security team, they would still be trapped in the building with no way to transmit the evidence. And if the file was indeed corrupted, as Draco claimed, Alara made a decision. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her weapon. Alara, what are you doing? Saul demanded, his own weapon still raised. He's right, Saul, she said quietly. We can't win this fight. Not here, not now. Smart decision, Major, Draco said approvingly. Now, if your companion will follow your example. In one fluid motion, Alara raised her weapon again, not at Draco or his security team, but at the environmental control panel behind them. Get down, she shouted to Saul as she fired. The pulse round struck the control panel, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. Alarms blared as the environmental systems went haywire, and emergency protocols automatically sealed the room to prevent contamination of other areas. In the confusion, Alara grabbed Saul's arm and pulled him toward the maintenance tunnel they had used to enter. What are you doing? He asked, as they scrambled into the narrow passage. Buying us time, she replied, her voice urgent. Draco said the Ghost Legion tech creates a containment field, right? That means it's blocking all communications in and out of the building. Yes, but... So if we can get outside that field, we can still transmit the data. Corrupted or not, it might be enough to raise questions, especially coming from a supposedly dead war hero. Understanding dawned in Saul's eyes. The rover. It has a long-range transmitter powerful enough to reach the major news networks. Exactly, but first we need to get out of here alive. They emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a corridor, now filled with smoke from various system failures, triggered by the damage to the environmental controls. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over everything, and distant shouts indicated security forces were regrouping. This way, Saul said, leading them toward a service exit. With the environmental systems compromised, some of the security lockdowns will have been overridden by safety protocols. They encountered resistance twice more as they made their way through the building, but the confusion and smoke worked in their favor, allowing them to slip past or quickly neutralize opposition before continuing their escape. When they finally reached a service exit, they found it locked down, despite the emergency. Draco must have overridden the safety protocols, Alara said, examining the door's control panel. Stand back, Saul replied, retrieving a small explosive device from his bag. This should do the trick. He placed the device on the door's weakest point, set a 5-second timer, and pulled Alara around the corner for protection. The explosion was surprisingly controlled, creating an opening just large enough for them to squeeze through, without causing a catastrophic breach that would trigger additional alarms. Outside, the night air of Bazzara felt cool and clean after the smoke-filled corridors. But they knew they couldn't linger. Security forces would be swarming the area within minutes. We need to reach the rover, Saul said as they ducked into an alleyway, avoiding the main streets, where they would be easily spotted. Wait, Alara replied, pulling him to a stop. Before we do anything else, let me see that file. I want to know if Draco was telling the truth. Saul hesitated, then produced his data device. They huddled in the shadows as he accessed the Lazarus protocol file. For a moment, the device seemed to process normally. Then, the screen flickered and displayed a simple message. Decoy file, security alert initiated. He wasn't bluffing. Saul said, his voice hollow with disappointment. All this risk for nothing. Not necessarily, Alara replied, thinking quickly. The data chip you gave me earlier. You said it contains everything you've gathered so far. Is that enough to implicate Draco? It's circumstantial. Enough to raise serious questions, but not enough for a conviction. But enough to start an investigation, to get people looking more closely at his activities. Saul nodded slowly. Yes, if it reached the right people. Then that's our new mission, Alara decided. We broadcast what we have and we keep gathering evidence. This isn't over, Saul. Not by a long shot. A renewed sense of purpose replaced their momentary despair. They continued moving through the back streets of Bazzara, making their way toward the public garage where they had left the rover. Twice they had to hide as security patrols passed, but they managed to reach the garage without being detected. The rover was where they had left it, seemingly untouched. Yet both approached cautiously, aware that it could have been discovered and trapped. Saul used a scanner to check for surveillance devices or explosives, finding none. Looks clean, he reported. But we should assume Draco has alerted all security forces to look for this vehicle. We won't have long once we activate the transmitter. They climbed inside, and Saul immediately began preparing the long-range communication system, while Alara kept watch. I'm setting it to broadcast on all emergency frequencies, he explained, as he worked. It will reach not just news networks but military channels, civilian communications, everything. Draco won't be able to contain it. How long will the transmission take? About 3 minutes for the full data package. We need to stay in place until it's complete. Those 3 minutes felt like an eternity as they sat in the rover, exposed and vulnerable. Outside, they could hear the increasing activity of security forces, searching the area, the whine of patrol vehicles growing closer. The transmission was at 90% when the first security vehicle entered the garage, its searchlight sweeping across the rows of parked vehicles. We need to move, Alara urged, watching the approaching threat. Just a few more seconds, Saul replied, his attention fixed on the transmitter. 95%? 98%. The searchlight swept closer, about to reveal their position. Transmission complete, Saul announced, powering down the system. Let's go. He started the rover's engine, but before they could move, the garage was suddenly flooded with light as multiple security vehicles converged on their position. Exit route, Alara asked, drawing her weapon. Saul pointed to a maintenance ramp on the far side of the garage. If we can reach that, it leads to a service tunnel that connects to the industrial district. We might lose them there. Without waiting for the security forces to organize, Saul gunned the rover's engine, sending it surging forward directly toward the nearest security vehicle. The sudden aggressive movement caught the officers by surprise, allowing Saul to swerve at the last moment and zip past them toward the maintenance ramp. Pulse fire erupted behind them, several shots impacting the rover's rear armor. The vehicle shuddered but maintained speed as Saul expertly navigated through the garage toward their escape route. They were halfway to the ramp when a security barrier slammed down, blocking their path. Hold on, Saul shouted, accelerating rather than braking. The rover smashed through the barrier with a screech of metal and a shower of sparks. The impact damaged the front end, but the vehicle kept moving, plunging down the maintenance ramp into the dimly lit service tunnel beyond. Behind them, security vehicles gave chase, their sirens wailing. But the service tunnel was narrow, designed for maintenance vehicles rather than the heavier security transports, giving the more nimble rover an advantage. For several tense minutes, they raced through the tunnel system, taking turns at random, trying to shake their pursuers. Gradually, the sounds of the chase faded behind them, and when they finally emerged into the industrial district, there was no immediate sign of pursuit. We did it, Alara said, allowing herself a moment of relief. The data is out there. People will know the truth. Part of the truth, Sol corrected, navigating the rover through the maze-like streets of the industrial zone. But it's a start. What now? We need to go to ground. Draco will throw everything he has into finding us. Sol guided the rover into an abandoned warehouse, concealing it among rusting machinery. I have another safe house on the outskirts of the city. We can regroup there, monitor the response to our broadcast, and plan our next move. As they abandoned the rover and continued on foot through the industrial district, the first rays of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. It seemed fitting somehow, a new day dawning as they struck the first blow against the corruption that had shadowed their lives for so long. They had traveled about a kilometer when Alara's communicator chirped, a sound that startled them both, as it had been silent for hours. She activated it cautiously, expecting a trap or a threat from Draco. Instead, the screen displayed a news alert. Breaking war hero returns from the dead, accuses Security Council, head of corruption and war crimes. It's working, she said, showing Sol the alert. The major networks have picked up the story. Other alerts began coming in rapid succession calls for investigations, statements from political figures distancing themselves from Draco military officials, expressing shock and demanding answers. The data package they had transmitted was having exactly the effect they had hoped for, creating a firestorm of controversy that even someone as powerful as Draco Valen couldn't easily contain. This is just the beginning. Sol said, his expression a mix of satisfaction and determination. Draco won't go down without a fight. He still has considerable resources and influence. But he's on the defensive now, Alara pointed out. And he no longer has the element of surprise. He knows we're alive and what we're capable of. They reached a public transportation hub, just as it was opening for the day's operations. Mingling with the early morning workers, they boarded a maglev train bound for the city outskirts, their nondescript appearance helping them blend into the crowd. As the train pulled away from the station carrying them toward temporary safety, Ilara's communicator chirped again. This time, the alert made her blood run cold. Commander Draco Valen issues statement. Ghost Legion terrorists threaten Bizarra martial law declared. She showed it to Sol, who read it with a grim expression. He's moving faster than I expected. With martial law in effect, he can control movement in and out of the city, conduct searches without warrants, and detain people indefinitely. Then we need to move faster too. Alara replied, her mind already working on potential strategies. The safe house? How secure is it really? It's not registered in any official records and it's shielded against standard detection methods. But if Draco commits significant resources to a sector-by-sector search, we can't stay there long, she concluded. We need a more permanent solution, somewhere beyond Draco's reach where we can continue gathering evidence and building support. Sol was quiet for a moment, considering. There might be a way, he said finally, but it's risky and it would mean leaving Ares 9 altogether. I'm listening. Before I was captured, I established contact with a network of veterans who suspected something was wrong with the official narratives about the war's end. They've been working quietly for years, gathering information, building support within the military and civilian sectors. They call themselves the Undying Soldiers. I have heard rumors, Alara admitted, but I assumed they were just disgruntled veterans unhappy with the peace terms. They're much more than that. They have resources, safe houses on multiple planets, even some sympathetic officials within the Federation government. If we can reach them, they could provide the protection and support we need to continue our mission. How do we contact them? There's a communications array in the southern hemisphere of Ares 9 at an abandoned mining outpost. It's powerful enough to reach their nearest cell on Nebulon 5. Alara felt a pang at the mention of Nebulon 5, remembering their conversation the night before the Red Dawn battle. Sol's dream of building a cabin by the lakes, of leaving military life behind. How different things might have been if he had never died, if they had both survived the war intact. How far is this communications array? She asked, pushing aside the what-ifs to focus on the present. About 600 kilometers from Bazara. Under normal circumstances, we could make it in a day's journey. But with martial law in effect, Draco will have checkpoints on all major routes. So we take the minor routes, Alara suggested. Cross-country if necessary. It won't be easy, Saul warned. The terrain outside the established routes is harsh and there are sandstorms this time of year. When has anything about this been easy? Alara replied with a grim smile. We do what we have to do. They exited the train at the final stop, a small community on the very edge of Bazara's urban sprawl. From there, they proceeded on foot to Saul's safe house, a modest dwelling disguised as an automated environmental monitoring station. Once inside, Saul activated various security measures scanners to detect approaching vehicles or individuals' jammers to prevent surveillance and a system that would erase all evidence of their presence if compromised. We'll rest here for a few hours, he decided, monitor the news feeds to see how the situation develops, then prepare for the journey south. While Saul checked the equipment and supplies they would need, Alara focused on gathering intelligence. She accessed various news sources, official announcements, and the less regulated communication channels where people shared information the authorities preferred to suppress. The picture that emerged was both encouraging and concerning. On one hand, their broadcast had indeed created a significant stir with many prominent figures, calling for investigations into Draco's activities. On the other hand, Draco was using the martial law declaration to crack down on dissent, detaining anyone who spoke too loudly against him, and controlling the flow of information within Bazara. He's scared, Alara observed, as they reviewed the reports together. These aren't the actions of someone confident in their position. No, but they are the actions of someone dangerous, Saul cautioned. The more threatened he feels, the more extreme his measures will become. A priority alert suddenly appeared across all channels, a direct broadcast from Draco Valen himself. They watched in tense silence as his face filled the screen, his expression grave but controlled. Citizens of the Federation. He began his voice carrying the practiced authority that had made him such an effective leader during the war. It is with deep concern that I address you today. Our peaceful society is facing a threat from within, a cell of Ghost Legion terrorists who seek to destabilize our government and return us to the chaos of war. He continued weaving a narrative that painted Saul as a brainwashed operative, and Alara as his unwitting accomplice, manipulated through her emotional connection to a man she had once known. These terrorists have employed sophisticated psychological warfare, using the image of a fallen hero to spread lies and confusion. Draco explained his expression, now one of sympathetic understanding. Major Alara Voss, a decorated officer who has served the Federation with distinction, has fallen victim to their manipulation. We believe she is being coerced or controlled through advanced Ghost Legion conditioning techniques. Alara felt a chill as Draco addressed her directly. Major Voss, if you are watching this, we understand you are not acting of your own free will. Help is available. Return to Federation authorities, and you will receive the medical and psychological treatment you need. You will not be held responsible for actions taken under duress. The message continued, offering a substantial reward for information leading to their capture and announcing increased security measures throughout not just Bazara, but the entire Ares system. When the broadcast ended, Alara and Saul sat in stunned silence for a moment. He's cleverer than I gave him credit for, Saul finally said. By portraying you as a victim, rather than an accomplice, he's trying to isolate me and undermine our credibility as a unit. It's a standard tactic, Alara replied, her tactical mind analyzing the strategy. Divide and conquer. And it has the added benefit of making anyone who might help us think twice. They'd be aiding a dangerous terrorist who has brainwashed a decorated officer. All the more reason to reach the undying soldiers as quickly as possible, Saul said, rising to check their preparations. We need allies who won't be swayed by Draco's propaganda. They spent the next hour gathering supplies, studying maps of the terrain they would need to cross, and making final adjustments to their equipment. The journey would be challenging under the best circumstances. With Draco's forces actively hunting them, it would be grueling. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Alara noticed Sol wincing slightly as he lifted a supply pack. "You're injured," she said, moving closer to examine him. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "An old wound that acts up sometimes." But when Alara insisted on checking, she found a pulse burn on his side, partially hidden by his clothing. A wound he had received during their escape from the archive center, but had concealed until now. "This needs treatment," she said, firmly retrieving a medical kit from their supplies. Sol reluctantly allowed her to clean and dress the wound, applying a regenerative gel that would accelerate healing. As she worked, her fingers occasionally brushed against his skin, and she couldn't help but remember other times she had treated his injuries during the war. Moments of quiet intimacy amidst the chaos of battle. "Thank you," he said softly when she had finished. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the years of separation seemed to fall away. "We look after each other," she replied, her voice equally soft. "That's how we'll survive this." With the supplies packed and their route planned, they prepared to leave the relative safety of the safe house. Before they did, Sol activated a delayed self-destruct sequence that would erase all evidence of their presence 30 minutes after their departure. "Ready?" he asked, standing at the door. Alara nodded, shouldering her pack. "Ready." They stepped out into the harsh sunlight of Ares 9, beginning the long journey south. Two ghosts moving through the desert, hunted by the past, reaching for a future that seemed just beyond their grasp. The journey south proved even more challenging than anticipated. To avoid detection, they traveled primarily at night, navigating by the stars and Sol's knowledge of the terrain. During the day, they sought shelter in caves or rock formations, protecting themselves from both the scorching sun and searching aircraft. By the third day, they had covered nearly half the distance to the abandoned mining outpost, but their progress was slowing. Water was becoming scarce, and the ever-present threat of discovery meant they could never truly rest. As they sheltered in a narrow canyon during the heat of the day, monitoring communication frequencies for any sign they had been detected, Alara noticed Sol seemed unusually preoccupied. "What is it?" she asked. "Beyond the obvious, I mean." He hesitated, then said, "There's something I haven't told you about the Undying Soldiers. Something important." "I'm listening." "They're not just a network of veterans and sympathizers. They're evolving into something more. A movement dedicated to fundamental change within the Federation." "What kind of change?" "Transparency. Accountability. A return to the ideals the Federation was founded on before power became concentrated in the hands of people like Draco." Sol's expression was earnest. "They believe, I believe, that the current system is broken beyond repair, that it needs to be dismantled and rebuilt." "You're talking about revolution," Alara said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm talking about justice," he countered. "About creating a system where people like Draco can't profit from war and suffering, where the sacrifices of soldiers like us actually mean something." Alara was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. She had spent years questioning the system, seeing its flaws, experiencing firsthand how those in power could manipulate the truth. But revolution, that was a step further than she had allowed herself to contemplate. "If what you're saying is true," she said finally, "then by helping you contact the Undying Soldiers, I'm not just fighting against Draco. I'm committing to something much larger." "You don't have to," Sol assured her quickly. "You can walk away once we reach the communications array. I'll understand." "Walk away to what?" she asked with a humorless laugh. "Draco has labeled me a victim at best, a terrorist at worst. There's no going back to my old life. There are other planets, other systems, places beyond the Federation's reach where you could start over." "Is that what you want for me to walk away?" Sol met her gaze directly. "What I want," he said quietly, "is what I've always wanted, for you to be safe and happy. But I also know that you're a soldier, Alara, a leader. Fighting for what you believe in is part of who you are. She looked away, unable to hold the intensity of his gaze. And what about us? She asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between them since his return. Where do we fit into all this? That depends on you, he replied softly. 7 years is a long time. We're not the same people we were. But what I felt for you, that hasn't changed. Before Alara could respond, a distant rumbling interrupted the moment. They both tensed, alert to potential danger. Sandstorm, Saul said, moving to the canyon entrance to look at the horizon. A big one coming this way. Alara joined him, observing the massive wall of swirling sand approaching from the northwest. A common but deadly phenomenon on Ares 9, capable of stripping the flesh from bones if one was caught unprotected in its path. How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe less. We need to find better shelter. They quickly gathered their supplies and moved deeper into the canyon, searching for a cave or overhang that would provide adequate protection. The wind was already strengthening, carrying the first particles of stinging sand. There. Alara pointed to a narrow fissure in the canyon wall, barely visible unless one knew to look for it. That might lead to something. The fissure proved to be the entrance to a small cave system carved by ancient water flows, long since dried up. They squeezed through, finding themselves in a chamber, large enough to stand in comfortably, with several smaller tunnels leading deeper into the rock. This should protect us, Saul said, settling their gear against one wall. Now we wait. The storm arrived with sudden, overwhelming force. Even within the cave they could hear its fury, a howling, shrieking wind that seemed almost alive in its rage. Sand filtered in through the smallest cracks, accumulating in tiny drifts on the cave floor. These can last anywhere from hours to days, Sol explained, as they made themselves as comfortable as possible. All we can do is wait it out. They shared a meager meal from their supplies, conserving what remained for the journey ahead. As the storm raged outside, they talked, really talked, for the first time since Saul's return. Alara told him about the years after his death, her growing suspicions about the official narrative, the subtle threats when she asked too many questions, her eventual decision to go into a self-imposed exile, rather than continue serving a system she no longer trusted. Saul shared his experiences with the Ghost Legion, the brutal conditioning that had nearly broken him, his gradual infiltration of their ranks, the careful gathering of evidence, and, finally, his contact with the undying soldiers that had given him hope for something beyond mere survival. When did you decide to come back for me? Alara asked, as the storm's intensity began to wane hours later. I never stopped looking for a way back to you, he admitted. But the opportunity came 2 months ago when I learned you were making your annual pilgrimage to the cemetery. It seemed fitting somehow, coming back to you there. Alara thought about that moment, kneeling at his grave, unaware that he stood behind her alive. The shock, the disbelief, the spark of hope that had ignited within her after years of numbness. I still can't quite believe you're really here, she confessed. Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming or if I've finally lost my mind after years of grief. Saul reached out his hand, finding hers in the dim light of the cave. I'm real, he said simply, and I'm not going anywhere. Not again. The warmth of his touch anchored her to the present, to the reality of his presence. Whatever came next, whether they reached the undying soldiers, whether they succeeded in bringing down Draco, whether they survived at all, in this moment, they were together. After 7 years of loss and loneliness, that was enough. The storm eventually passed, leaving the landscape transformed. Dunes, shifted landmarks, buried new features revealed by the wind's relentless sculpting. They emerged cautiously, assessing the changed terrain and recalculating their route to the mining outpost. We lost nearly a day, Saul noted, studying the position of the sun. We need to make up time. They traveled through the day, despite the heat pushing themselves to their limits. The storm had one benefit. It had temporarily grounded aerial searches, giving them a brief respite from that particular threat. By nightfall, they had made good progress, but both were showing signs of exhaustion. After finding a sheltered position for their brief rest, Ilara took first watch while Sol slept. She sat with her back against a rock pulse rifle across her knees, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The twin moons of Aries 9 cast an eerie blue-green light over the desert, creating shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Her thoughts drifted to what Sol had told her about the undying soldiers and their revolutionary aspirations. Was she ready to commit to such a cause, to fight not just against Draco, but against the entire system he represented? She had been a soldier. Her entire adult life had believed in the Federation, and its ideals, had fought and bled for them. But the war had revealed the corruption at the core of those ideals, the way power could be twisted to serve the few at the expense of the many. Perhaps a new beginning was exactly what the Federation needed. Perhaps the undying soldiers, with their vision of transparency and accountability, represented the best hope for a future worth fighting for. A slight sound broke her reverie, the faint whine of an engine, distant but approaching. She tensed, listening intently, trying to identify the source. "Sol," she whispered, moving to wake him. "We have company." He was instantly alert, years of training overriding the need for sleep. "What kind?" "Vehicle, small by the sound of it, coming from the east." They quickly gathered their equipment, preparing to move if necessary. Sol produced a pair of night vision binoculars and scanned the direction of the sound. "Single rider," he reported. "Lightweight scout bike, military issue, but no insignia visible." "Patrol," Ilara suggested. "Possibly, or—" He continued watching as the rider came closer. "Wait. I recognize that riding style." Before Ilara could question him further, Sol stood and made a series of hand signals. Military signals, specifically those used by special operations units during the war. To her surprise, the rider responded with corresponding signals, then changed course directly toward their position. "Who is it?" she demanded, her pulse rifle raised and ready. "An ally," Sol assured her. "Captain Mira Salen's younger brother Kido. He's with the undying soldiers." "You said Mira was dead." "She is." Kido joined the movement after learning the truth about her death. Sol stepped out from their cover, making himself visible to the approaching rider. "He's one of the few people I trust completely." The scout bike slowed as it neared their position, its engine dropping to a low hum. The rider, dressed in non-reflective black armor, similar to what Ghost Legion operatives wore, dismounted and removed his helmet. Kido Salen bore a striking resemblance to his sister. The same sharp features and intense eyes, though his expression held a hardness that Mira's never had. He approached cautiously, his hand near a weapon at his hip, until he confirmed Sol's identity. "You made it," he said, clasping Sol's forearm in greeting. "When we lost contact after your transmission from Bazara, we feared the worst." "It was a close call," Sol admitted. "Draco was waiting for us. He knew we were coming." Kido's expression darkened. "We suspected a leak in our communication network. Your experience confirms it." His gaze shifted to Ilara. "Major Voss, my sister spoke highly of you." "Your sister was one of the finest officers I ever served with," Ilara replied. "I'm sorry for your loss." A shadow of grief passed over Kido's features, quickly replaced by determination. "Her death will be avenged when Draco falls." He turned back to Sol. "I was sent to find you. Our surveillance detected increased military activity in this sector, and we intercepted communications about expanding the search pattern to include this area. We're headed for the old mining outpost," Sol explained, "to use the communications array to contact your cell on Nebulon 5. "That won't be necessary now," Kido replied. "I can take you directly to our base. It's about 100 kilometers southwest of here. With my scout bike and the spare I have hidden nearby, we can reach it before dawn." Ilara and Sol exchanged glances. This was an unexpected development, potentially a fortunate one, but also a risk. If Kido was legitimate, he could lead them to safety and accelerate their plans. If he was compromised— "How did you find us?" Ilara asked, her suspicion evident. "This is a big desert to search for two people on foot." We've been monitoring Draco's search patterns and extrapolated your most likely route based on Sol's known preferences for terrain, Keto explained. Plus, the sandstorm narrowed the possibilities. Anyone with sense would have sought shelter in one of the canyon systems in this region. It was a reasonable explanation, but Alara remained cautious. You'll understand if I'm not immediately trusting of convenient rescues. Keto nodded, respect showing in his expression. I'd expect nothing less from someone who's survived this long. What can I do to prove my intentions? Sol intervened. The last time I saw Mira alive, she gave me something to hold for her. What was it? Her mother's pendant, Keto answered without hesitation. A silver tree with roots extending down the chain. It was the only thing she had left from our home world. She told you if anything happened to her, it should go to her family. Sol relaxed slightly. He's telling the truth. Mira never told anyone else about that pendant. Alara wasn't entirely convinced, but she recognized the need to make a decision. Remaining in place was becoming increasingly dangerous as Draco's search expanded, and if Keto was genuine, he represented their best chance of reaching safety. Lead the way, she said finally, but know that I'll be watching you very carefully. Keto's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. I'd expect nothing less, Major. My sister always said you were as cautious as you were brave. It's how you stayed alive when others didn't. He led them to a location half a kilometer away, where a second scout bike was hidden beneath a camouflage tarp, indistinguishable from the surrounding rocks and sand. The bikes were military-grade but stripped of identifying markers, fast, quiet, and equipped with basic stealth technology to reduce their heat and electromagnetic signatures. Sol, you take this one, Keto instructed. Major Voss can ride with me or with you if she prefers. With Sol, Alara said immediately, not yet willing to put herself literally in Keto's hands. They mounted the vehicles Alara positioned behind Sol, with her arms around his waist. Despite the circumstances, she couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be this close to him again, how easily their bodies remembered each other, even after 7 years apart. Keto took the lead, keeping their speed moderate to minimize dust trails and engine signatures. The scout bikes moved smoothly over the difficult terrain, covering in hours what would have taken days on foot. As promised, they reached the Undying Soldier's base just before dawn, a collection of structures built into the side of a mesa, nearly invisible, unless one knew exactly what to look for. From a distance, it appeared to be nothing more than a natural rock formation. Up close, Alara could see the cleverly disguised entrance's sensor arrays and defensive positions. Welcome to Haven, Keto said, as they approached the main entrance, which was revealed only when he transmitted a specific signal from his scout bike. One of 12 such bases scattered across the Federation. The entrance, a reinforced door set into the rock face, slid open, allowing them to ride directly inside to a large chamber that served as a vehicle bay. Several people in nondescript clothing moved purposefully around the space, some turning to observe the new arrivals with cautious interest. As they dismounted, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair approached. Her bearing was unmistakably military, though she wore no uniform or insignia. General Corin Dax, Sol, said by way of introduction, former commander of the 7th Fleet, now leader of the Undying Soldiers on Ares 9. Alara felt a shock of recognition. General Dax had been a legendary figure during the war, known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering integrity. Her sudden retirement immediately after the peace treaty was signed had sparked rumors, but few knew what had become of her. Major Voss, the general, greeted her with a formal nod. Your reputation precedes you. Sol has spoken highly of your abilities. General, Alara responded automatically, straightening to attention before catching herself. I admit I'm surprised to find you here. The official story was that you retired to your homeworld. The official story, Dax replied, with a thin smile, like so many others, was a convenient fiction. In reality, I was given a choice: retire quietly or face court-martial on manufactured charges. I chose the option that would allow me to continue fighting, albeit in a different way. She turned to Saul. The data you transmitted from Bizarra has created quite a stir. Draco has been working overtime to discredit it, but enough questions have been raised that he's facing significant pressure, both from within the Federation government and from the public. Not enough to remove him from power, though, Saul observed. No, not yet. But he's vulnerable in a way he hasn't been before, which makes this the perfect time to deliver the killing blow. Dax gestured for them to follow her deeper into the base. Come. We have much to discuss, and you both look like you could use food rest and medical attention. The interior of Haven was a marvel of efficiency and adaptation. What had once been natural caves had been expanded and reinforced to create a fully functional base of operations living quarters, medical facilities, communications center armory, and training areas. Approximately 100 people moved throughout the complex. Some former military like Dax, others civilians, with specialized skills needed by the movement. After a brief medical examination, the doctor insisted on treating Saul's partially healed pulse burn properly. They were provided with clean clothes, food, and private quarters to rest. Despite her exhaustion, Alara found sleep elusive, her mind racing with everything she had seen and learned since leaving Bizarra. When she emerged several hours later, she found Saul in the base's central command center with General Dax Keto and several other high-ranking members of the Undying Soldiers. They were gathered around a holographic display, showing what appeared to be a detailed schematic of a space station. "What's this?" she asked, approaching the group. "Our next target," Dax explained. "Draco's secret command center in orbit around Ares 9's smaller moon. It's where he coordinates Ghost Legion operations and stores the most sensitive data, including, we believe, the complete Lazarus Protocol files." Alara studied the schematic with a tactician's eye. "This is a military installation. Attacking it would be an act of war." "We're already at war," Keto said grimly. "Draco just hasn't admitted it publicly." "What exactly are you planning?" Saul answered. "A targeted infiltration. Small team, minimal casualties focused on extracting the data rather than causing destruction." "And who would lead this infiltration?" Alara asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I would," Saul confirmed. "Along with Keto and 2 other operatives with Ghost Legion experience. We know their protocols, their security measures. We have the best chance of getting in and out successfully." Alara processed this information, her tactical mind already analyzing potential scenarios, identifying weaknesses, calculating risks. The plan was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy. But if successful, it could provide the evidence needed to remove Draco from power and expose the full extent of his crimes. "When?" she asked. 3 days from now," Dax replied. "We have a supply ship that makes regular deliveries to the station. We've arranged for our team to be part of the crew." "I want in," Alara said without hesitation. Saul shook his head. "It's too dangerous. You're not familiar with Ghost Legion protocols." "I'm a quick study," she interrupted. "And I have more experience with space station infiltration than anyone in this room except possibly the General." She turned to Dax. "Cygnus Station during the 3rd year of the war. My team extracted a high-value intelligence officer from under the noses of an entire enemy battalion." Dax nodded, acknowledging the reference. "I remember the operation. Cleanly executed, minimal casualties, mission success, against difficult odds. More importantly," Alara continued, her gaze returning to Saul, "I didn't come this far to sit on the sidelines while you risk your life again. We do this together or not at all." A tense silence followed her declaration. Saul's expression was conflicted concern for her safety, warring with respect for her abilities and determination. "She's right," Keto said unexpectedly. "Another experienced operator would increase our chances of success. And from what Mira told me, you and the Major always worked best as a team." After another moment of hesitation, Saul nodded. "All right. But you'll need to undergo intensive briefing on Ghost Legion protocols and station security systems. We have less than 3 days to prepare." "I'll be ready," Alara promised. The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation, studying station schematics, memorizing patrol patterns, learning Ghost Legion recognition codes and security protocols, and training with the advanced equipment they would use during the mission. The plan was precision itself. Infiltrate the station as part of the supply ship crew, access the central data core, using Saul's Ghost Legion credentials, which had not yet been deactivated, thanks to Draco's belief that he had died in the desert, download the Lazarus Protocol files, and extract before their presence was discovered. Simple in theory, incredibly dangerous in execution. On the morning of the mission, Alara found Saul alone in the armory, meticulously checking his equipment. She recognized the ritual. They had both performed it countless times before high-risk operations during the war. "Everything ready?" she asked, joining him in the final preparations. "As ready as it can be," he replied, his tone professional, but with an undercurrent of tension. Dax received intelligence that Draco himself might be on the station today. Apparently, he's been spending more time there since our broadcast, perhaps concerned about the security of his data. "That complicates things," Alara observed. "But it also presents an opportunity. If we could capture Draco—" "That's not the mission," Saul reminded her firmly. "We get the data and get out. Trying to apprehend Draco would elevate the risk significantly." "I know," she conceded. "But if the opportunity presents itself—" "We stick to the plan," he insisted, then softened slightly. "There will be time to deal with Draco directly, once we have the evidence needed to remove him from power legally." Alara nodded, accepting his reasoning, though part of her longed for a more direct confrontation with the man responsible for so much suffering. She turned her attention to her own equipment, performing the same meticulous checks. "Alara," Saul said quietly after a moment, his voice losing its professional edge, "if anything goes wrong up there—" "It won't," she interrupted, not looking up from her work. "But if it does," he persisted, "I want you to know that finding you again fighting alongside you, it's made these past few weeks worth everything I endured during those 7 years." She paused, finally meeting his gaze. "We're going to complete this mission, Saul, together. And then we're going to have a long overdue conversation about that cabin on Nebulon 5. A smile touched his lips, a genuine one that reached his eyes and reminded her of the Saul she had known before the war changed them both. "I'd like that." The moment was interrupted by Keto's arrival, announcing that the supply ship was preparing for departure. Final checks were completed, identities and cover stories confirmed, and equipment secured in specially designed compartments that would bypass standard security scans. The journey to the station was tense but uneventful. The supply ship, a standard Federation cargo vessel contracted for regular deliveries, attracted no unusual attention as it docked at the station's service bay. As part of the loading crew, Alara saw Keto and the other 2 operatives, a former Ghost Legion communications specialist named Vex, and a security systems expert called Talia, disembarked with their equipment crates. The station itself was a masterpiece of utilitarian design, modular sections connected by transfer tubes, powered by a central reactor with artificial gravity maintained throughout. What made it unique were the security measures, layers upon layers of checkpoint scanners and armed personnel protecting the inner sanctum, where Draco conducted his most sensitive operations. Their Ghost Legion credentials granted them access to the lower security areas without challenge. The real test would come when they attempted to reach the central data core in the station's heavily protected heart. "First checkpoint clear," Keto murmured into the secure comm system as they passed through the cargo processing area. Proceeding to maintenance level. Using service corridors and maintenance shafts, they made their way deeper into the station, bypassing the main thoroughfares, where they might encounter higher-ranking personnel who could question their presence. Vex and Talia peeled off to establish an alternative extraction route and to disable certain security systems that might otherwise detect their unauthorized access. Saul, Alara, and Keto continued toward the central data core, using the Ghost Legion security bypass technology to create temporary blind spots in the surveillance network. As they approached the highest security zone, Saul activated the device that would grant them 17 minutes of invisibility to the station's automated systems. 17-minute countdown initiated, he confirmed as the device emitted its signature silent pulse. Let's move. They reached the entrance to the data core without incident, Saul's credentials, granting them access to a sterile white corridor, leading to a reinforced door with a biometric scanner. This was the most critical moment. If Saul's biometric data had been purged from the system, alarms would trigger immediately. Saul placed his hand on the scanner, his expression betraying none of the tension Alara knew he must be feeling. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a soft chime, the scanner glowed green, and the door slid open. "They never removed you from the system," Keto observed quietly as they entered the data core chamber. "Draco's overconfidence works in our favor." The data core itself was a massive crystalline structure that rose from floor to ceiling, pulsing with blue-white light. The physical manifestation of the information that directed Ghost Legion operations throughout the Federation. Terminals surrounded it, allowing authorized personnel to access specific data segments as needed. 12 minutes remaining, Saul said, checking the countdown. "Keto, watch the door. Alara with me." They moved to the primary access terminal, where Saul connected a specialized device designed to bypass the core's internal security measures. His fingers moved rapidly over the interface, navigating through layers of encryption to locate the Lazarus protocol files. "Found it," he announced after several tense minutes. "Beginning download." A progress indicator appeared on the screen: 0%, 5%, 12%. 8 minutes remaining. Alara reported, dividing her attention between the countdown and the chamber entrance where Keto stood guard. The download continued: 27%, 36%, 48%. Movement in the corridor. Keto warned, suddenly his voice low and urgent. 2 individuals approaching. One appears to be high-ranking based on the uniform. Saul and Alara exchanged glances. The download was only at 63%, and they needed the complete file. "Hold position," Saul decided. "If they enter, we'll have to neutralize them quickly and quietly." Alara drew her pulse pistol, adjusting the setting to stun. They couldn't afford casualties that would trigger station-wide alerts, but they also couldn't allow anyone to interrupt the download or report their presence. The footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside the data core chamber. Voices were audible now, one deferential, the other authoritative and immediately recognizable. "Commander Draco," the first voice said. "The security logs show access to the data core, but there's no scheduled maintenance today." "Check it," Draco ordered. "I want verification of everyone who's entered this section in the past hour." "Yes, sir." The door began to slide open. Keto moved to one side, preparing to ambush whoever entered first. Alara took position behind a secondary terminal, her weapon ready. Saul remained at the primary terminal, monitoring the download, which had reached 79%. A security officer stepped into the chamber, his eyes widening in shock as he registered the unauthorized presence. Before he could react, Keto struck him from behind with a precisely calculated blow that rendered him unconscious without serious injury. But Draco had seen enough to recognize the threat. He remained in the corridor, already reaching for his communication device. "Security breach in the data core, all units." Alara moved without conscious thought, years of training taking over. She lunged forward, clearing the distance to the door in 3 rapid strides, her weapon discharging a stun pulse that caught Draco squarely in the chest. He collapsed, mid-sentence, the communication device clattering to the floor beside him. "Drag them both in and seal the door." Saul ordered, his attention still on the download now, at 91%. Keto and Alara pulled the unconscious bodies into the chamber, securing the door behind them. They bound both men with restraints from their equipment, ensuring they would remain contained when they regained consciousness. "Download complete," Saul announced with evident relief. I've got the Lazarus Protocol files, plus additional data on Ghost Legion operations throughout the Federation. 5 minutes remaining on the security bypass, Alara noted. We need to move. She looked down at Draco's unconscious form, the man who had orchestrated Saul's apparent death, who had used his sacrifice as propaganda, who had corrupted the ideals they had fought for during the war. It would be so easy to ensure he never woke up. A simple adjustment to her weapon settings, a single pulse to the head. Saul seemed to read her thoughts. Not like this, he said quietly. He needs to face justice publicly, answer for his crimes in front of the people he betrayed. Alara met his gaze, then nodded once, stepping away from Draco. You're right, let's go. They exited the data core chamber, retracing their path through the service corridors toward their extraction point. The security bypass continued to shield them from the station's automated systems, but they knew Draco's absence would soon be noted by his staff, triggering a manual search regardless of what the systems reported. When they reached the rendezvous point, Vex and Talia were waiting as planned. The alternative route is secured, Talia reported. We've programmed a maintenance pod for launch from the auxiliary bay. It will look like a routine debris disposal until we're clear of the station's defensive perimeter. Any complications? Saul asked, as they hurried toward the auxiliary bay. None so far, Vex replied. But we intercepted communications indicating increased security alerts. Someone's figured out something's wrong even if they don't know exactly what yet. They reached the auxiliary bay, just as their security bypass timer reached 0. Somewhere in the station, alarms would now be triggering as the surveillance system suddenly registered unauthorized personnel in restricted areas. The maintenance pod was small, designed for 2 operators at most, but it would accommodate all 5 of them for the short journey to a rendezvous point, where an undying soldier's vessel waited to extract them. They boarded quickly, Talia initiating the launch sequence, while the others secured themselves in the cramped space. Launch in 10 seconds, Talia announced as the bay doors began to open. 9, 8... An alarm blared, and a mechanical voice announced, Emergency lockdown initiated. All launch bay doors sealing. Security teams en route to all launch facilities. They're trying to trap us, Keto said, his expression grim. Override the lockdown, Saul instructed Talia. Use the Ghost Legion command codes. Her fingers flew over the pod's controls, inputting a series of complex codes. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the closing bay doors halted, then reversed, continuing their opening sequence. Launch now, Alara urged. Talia activated the thrusters, sending the pod shooting out of the bay moments before security teams arrived. Behind them, the station receded rapidly, its sleek form growing smaller against the backdrop of Ares 9's smaller moon. They'll send pursuit craft, Vex warned, monitoring the communication channels. Standard procedure for unauthorized launches. How long until we reach the rendezvous point? Saul asked. Approximately 12 minutes at maximum thrust, Talia replied. Pursuit craft could intercept us in 10 if they launch immediately. Then we need a distraction, Alara decided. She moved to the pod's simple weapons control, designed for debris clearing, but capable of being repurposed for defense. What's the range on these pulse emitters? Not enough to damage the station, Talia said, understanding Alara's intent, but enough to create electromagnetic interference that might delay pursuit launches. Do it, Saul authorized. Alara calibrated the pulse emitters to their maximum range, targeting the station's external communication arrays, rather than its structural elements. The goal was disruption, not destruction, to buy time, not to cause casualties. The emitters discharged, sending concentrated energy pulses toward the station. The effect was immediate. Several external arrays sparked visibly, and the station's lights flickered momentarily. Communication blackout achieved. Vex confirmed, monitoring the channels. They're switching to backup systems, but it's buying us time. For several tense minutes, they maintained maximum thrust, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the station. When the rendezvous point came into view, a small, nondescript vessel with undying soldiers' markings visible only at close range. A collective sense of relief passed through the pod. The docking procedure was executed with practiced efficiency, and soon they were aboard the extraction vessel, which immediately set course for deep space, where it could safely engage its faster-than-light drive without detection. Mission accomplished, Keto said, the tension of the past hours finally showing in his voice. The Lazarus Protocol files are ours. But Saul's expression remained serious as he connected his data device to the vessel's secure terminal, beginning the process of analyzing what they had acquired. "Something's wrong," Alara asked, recognizing the concern in his posture. "I'm not sure yet," he replied, his attention fixed on the data scrolling across the screen. "The files are intact, but there's something additional here. Something I wasn't expecting to find." The others gathered around as Sewell accessed a particularly heavily encrypted segment of the data. As the decryption completed, a series of images appeared, orbital scans of various Federation worlds, with specific locations marked for what appeared to be weapons deployments. "What is this?" Talia asked, leaning closer to study the images. "Operation Eternal Vigilance," Saul read from the accompanying text. "A Ghost Legion contingency plan for maintaining order in the event of widespread civil unrest." "These are targeting coordinates," Keto realized, his voice hardening. "For orbital strikes against civilian population centers." "Not just any population centers," Alara noted, recognizing several of the marked locations. "These are known hubs of political dissent centers, of opposition to Federation policies." "Draco wasn't just using the Ghost Legion to eliminate individuals who knew too much," Saul said slowly, the full implications becoming clear. "He was preparing for large-scale suppression of any organized resistance to his authority." "When was this plan scheduled for implementation?" Vex asked the question they all needed answered. Saul navigated through the data, searching for timeline information. What he found caused his expression to shift from concern to alarm. "It's already in motion," he said, his voice tense. "The first phase was initiated 3 days ago, when Draco declared martial law in Bazara. The weapons platforms are being moved into position now, with full operational status expected within 48 hours. "How many targets?" Alara asked, her tactical mind already calculating response options. 87 across 12 Federation worlds," Saul replied grimly, "including every known or suspected location of Undying Soldiers' activity." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about corruption or war profiteering anymore. This was preparation for mass murder on an unprecedented scale. The elimination of political opposition through orbital bombardment, disguised as a necessary response to terrorist threats. "We need to warn the other Undying Soldiers cells immediately," Keto said, moving toward the communication station. "And we need to make this information public before Draco can execute his plan." "Agreed," Saul nodded. "But we need to be strategic about how we release it. A direct broadcast might be dismissed as terrorist propaganda, especially with Draco controlling much of the media." "The Federation Assembly," Alara suggested. "They're scheduled to convene tomorrow for an emergency session on security measures following recent events. If we could present this evidence directly to the assembled representatives." "A direct address to the Assembly would be impossible," Talia objected. "Security would be impenetrable, especially now." "Not direct," Alara clarified. "But there's someone who could deliver the evidence for us. Someone whose voice would be heard even in the current climate of fear and suspicion." "Who?" Keto asked. "General Corin Dax," Alara replied. "She may have retired officially, but she still has allies within the Assembly representatives who respect her judgment and would listen to her warnings." "It's risky," Saul said, considering the suggestion. "Dax has remained in the shadows for years, precisely to maintain her operational freedom. Going public would expose her to Draco's retaliation." "I'm aware of the risks," came a new voice from the vessel's communication system. General Dax had been monitoring their transmission from Haven. "But Major Voss is right. This evidence needs to reach the Assembly, and I may be the only one who can deliver it with sufficient credibility to overcome Draco's influence." "You've been following our mission?" Saul asked, though he didn't sound surprised. "Of course," Dax replied matter-of-factly. "I don't send my people on high-risk operations without maintaining oversight. The data you've recovered exceeds our worst expectations and requires an immediate response." "What's your plan?" General Alara asked. "I still have contacts in the capital who can arrange a private audience with key assembly members before tomorrow's session. Once they see this evidence, even those who have supported Draco in the past will be forced to act against him." "And if they don't?" Keto questioned. "Then we proceed to our contingency plan." Dax set her tone, leaving no doubt about her determination. "But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Transmit the data to Haven immediately, then proceed to the secondary extraction point. We'll rendezvous there in 6 hours." The transmission ended, leaving the team to carry out their orders. As Sol prepared the data for secure transmission to Haven, Ilara found herself contemplating what Dax had meant by contingency plan. Despite her commitment to the undying soldier's cause, she still hoped for a resolution that wouldn't require further violence or destruction. "Thinking about what comes next?" Saul asked quietly, noticing her pensive expression. "Wondering if there will be a next that doesn't involve more fighting," she admitted. "If the Assembly acts on this evidence, if Draco is removed from power and his plans exposed, then what happens to the Federation, to the undying soldiers, to us?" Sol paused in his work, considering her questions. "The undying soldiers were never about destroying the Federation," he said carefully. "Only about restoring it to what it was meant to be. A government that serves all its citizens, not just those with power and influence. If Draco falls and his corruption is excised, perhaps there's a chance for reform without revolution." "And us?" Alara pressed the question that had been hovering between them since his return. A small smile touched his lips. "I still have plans for that cabin on Nebulan 5, he said softly. "If you're still interested." Before Ilara could respond, Vex called from the navigation console. "Proximity alert, pursuit craft, approaching multiple signatures." The moment of connection shattered as they rushed to their stations, the vessel's systems shifting to combat readiness. On the tactical display, 5 Ghost Legion interceptors were closing rapidly, their weapon systems powering up. "They must have tracked our FTL signature," Talia said, her hands moving quickly over the defense controls. "Shields at maximum." Evasive pattern Delta. Keto ordered the pilot, who immediately executed a series of unpredictable maneuvers designed to complicate targeting. "We can't outrun Ghost Legion interceptors," Saul said grimly. "And we can't risk being captured with the data transmission still in progress. Then we fight." Alara decided, moving to the weapons console. The extraction vessel wasn't designed for combat, but it had defensive capabilities that might give them a chance if used strategically. The first interceptor fired the energy blast, impacting their shields with enough force to rock the vessel. The shield indicator dropped to 82% capacity. "Return fire." Alara ordered, targeting the interceptor's propulsion system rather than its more heavily armored core. Her shot struck true, causing the pursuing craft to veer off course, its engine trailing plasma. "1 down, 4 to go," she reported, already shifting her targeting to the next threat. The remaining interceptors adjusted their approach, spreading out to attack from multiple angles. 2 more energy blasts struck the vessel, dropping shields to 65%. "The transmission is only at 68%. Saul reported, dividing his attention between the data console and the tactical situation. "We need at least another 6 minutes to complete it." "We may not have 6 minutes," Keto said, as another hit reduced their shields to 49%. "At this rate, our shields will fail in less than 4. Alara studied the tactical display, analyzing the interceptor's attack pattern and searching for a weakness they could exploit. There was something familiar about their formation, a standard Ghost Legion pursuit tactic she had encountered in simulation drills years ago. "They're using the hammer and anvil approach," she realized aloud. 3 interceptors maneuvering us toward the other 2, which are holding position ahead. Classic pincer movement. Saul agreed, recognizing the tactic as well. Which means we can use it against them. Alara continued a plan, forming rapidly. If we cut thrust and drop into a controlled spin precisely when they expect us to accelerate, the pursuing interceptors will overshoot, Keto finished her thought, and potentially collide with the waiting pair. Exactly. Then we use the momentary confusion to break away at maximum thrust. The pilot looked dubious but nodded. On your mark, Major. Alara watched the tactical display, intently waiting for the precise moment when the interceptors committed to their final approach. Timing would be everything. Too early, and they would adjust. Too late, and the maneuver would fail. Prepare to cut thrust on my mark, she instructed, her focus absolute. 3, 2, 1, now. The vessel's engines shut down abruptly, and thrusters fired in a carefully calculated sequence that sent them into a controlled spiral. As predicted, the pursuing interceptors shot past them, unable to adjust in time. One collided with the waiting pair, resulting in a spectacular explosion that damaged a second interceptor. Now, maximum thrust, Alara shouted. The engines roared back to life, propelling them away from the remaining interceptors, which were momentarily disoriented by the unexpected maneuver and the destruction of their companions. It worked, the pilot exclaimed, genuine admiration in his voice. 2 interceptors destroyed, 1 severely damaged. The remaining 2 are regrouping, but we've gained significant distance. Transmission at 83%, Saul reported. 3 more minutes to completion. The damaged interceptor has withdrawn, Talia observed, monitoring the tactical display. But the other 2 are still in pursuit, though, at extended range. For several tense minutes, they maintained their desperate flight, the remaining interceptors gradually closing the distance, but not yet within effective weapons range. The data transmission continued each percentage point, bringing them closer to their objective. Transmission complete, Saul announced finally. Haven has received the full Lazarus protocol files and the Eternal Vigilance data. Relief was short-lived as the pursuing interceptors came within firing range once more, their weapons locking onto the vessel. Brace for impact, Keto warned. The first blast struck with devastating force, dropping their shields to critical levels. The second hit penetrated, causing damage to the vessel's port engine and sending alarms blaring throughout the ship. Port engine failing. The pilot reported, fighting to maintain control. We're losing power and maneuverability. Can we still reach the secondary extraction point? Saul asked. Not with both interceptors on our tail, the pilot replied grimly. We need to lose them first, and I'm not sure that's possible with our damaged engines. Alara exchanged a look with Saul, both of them recognizing the gravity of their situation. They had accomplished their primary mission. The data had been transmitted, but their own survival was now in serious jeopardy. There's one option, Vex said, suddenly pointing to a sector of the tactical display. The asteroid field in Sector 9. It's dense enough that the interceptors would have difficulty following, especially if they maintain their current speed. It's also dense enough that we might not make it through ourselves, Talia pointed out, especially with damaged engines. I can navigate it, the pilot said with quiet confidence. I trained in the Belt Wars. If anyone can get us through, I can. Keto made the decision. Set course for the asteroid field, maximum sustainable thrust. The vessel changed direction, heading toward the dense collection of space debris that littered Sector 9. The interceptors followed, still firing occasionally, but with reduced accuracy due to the increasing distance. As they approached the asteroid field, the true scale of the challenge became apparent. Thousands of rocky bodies ranging from tiny fragments to massive planetoids moved in complex, overlapping orbits, creating a natural maze of extraordinary danger. Everyone secure yourselves, the pilot instructed, his hands tightening on the controls. This is going to be rough. They entered the field at reduced speed, the pilot expertly weaving between asteroids with incredible precision. Behind them, the interceptors hesitated briefly before following their superior maneuverability, somewhat offset by their pilot's apparent unfamiliarity with such hazardous navigation. For several harrowing minutes, the chase continued through the asteroid field, a deadly dance of avoidance and pursuit. The extraction vessel sustained additional minor damage from debris impacts, but the pilot's skill kept them ahead of their pursuers and away from the largest threats. Then, disaster struck. One of the interceptors, attempting a particularly aggressive maneuver to close the distance, miscalculated and collided with a mid-sized asteroid. The resulting explosion sent fragments hurtling in all directions, several impacting their vessel with significant force. Primary power failing. Talia reported as systems throughout the ship flickered and alarms intensified. Switching to emergency reserves. The remaining interceptor is breaking off pursuit, Vex announced, monitoring the tactical display. They're withdrawing from the asteroid field. Damage assessment, Keto demanded. Multiple hull breaches sealed by emergency force fields, Talia replied. Propulsion at 27% capacity. Life support stable but operating on backup systems. Communication array damaged but partially functional. Can we still reach the secondary extraction point? Saul asked. The pilot shook his head grimly. Not in our current condition. We might make it to the edge of the asteroid field, but no further without significant repairs. Options. Alara asked, maintaining the calm efficiency that had characterized her military career. There's a mining outpost in a relatively stable pocket of the asteroid field. Vex suggested consulting the navigation database. Abandoned during the war but potentially still equipped with basic facilities, including a communication relay that might be operational. Distance, Saul asked. Approximately 40 minutes at our current speed. Set course, Keto decided. We'll assess our situation once there. The journey to the mining outpost was tense, but uneventful. The remaining interceptor, having apparently decided against pursuing them further into the asteroid field. When they finally reached their destination, they found a structure that had indeed been abandoned for years, but remained largely intact. A testament to the durability of Federation military engineering. They docked carefully, the vessel's damaged systems, protesting even this basic maneuver. Once secured, they conducted a preliminary scan of the outpost, confirming that it maintained minimal life support and power from automated generators that had continued functioning during its abandonment. Atmospheric pressure, stable oxygen levels acceptable, Vex reported after analyzing the scan results. It's safe to board, though I'd recommend suits until we verify conditions personally. Suited up, they entered the outpost through the main airlock, finding it much as expected. A utilitarian facility designed for efficiency rather than comfort, dusty from years of disuse, but structurally sound. They confirmed the scanner readings, determining that the outpost was indeed habitable, if barely. The communication relay is intact, Saul announced, after examining the control center. With some adjustments, we should be able to contact Haven and report our situation. While Saul and Vex worked on the communications, Keto, Talia, and Alara conducted a more thorough exploration of the outpost, cataloging supplies and assessing whether repairs to their vessel might be possible with the available resources. There's enough preserved food to last several weeks, Talia reported when they regrouped in the control center. And the water reclamation system is still functional. Basic survival isn't a concern. What about repairs? Keto asked. More challenging, Alara replied. There are some spare parts and basic tools, but nothing specifically designed for our vessel's propulsion system. We might be able to jury-rig temporary repairs, but I wouldn't trust them for more than a short jump. We've established contact with Haven, Sol announced, interrupting their discussion. General Dax wishes to speak with all of us. They gathered around the communication console, where Dax's voice came through with surprising clarity, given the improvised nature of their connection. Report status, she ordered without preamble. Keto provided a succinct summary of their situation. The successful data transmission, the pursuit and damage to their vessel, their current location at the abandoned mining outpost, and their limited repair capabilities. Understood, Dax replied when he had finished. I've dispatched a recovery vessel to your location, but given the need for stealth and the hazards of the asteroid field, it will take approximately 72 hours to reach you. What's the status of the Lazarus Protocol data? Saul asked. Has it been presented to the Assembly representatives? That's in progress, Dax confirmed. I've made contact with 3 key committee chairs, who have agreed to review the evidence in a secure location before tomorrow's session. Initial reactions are promising. Even those who have supported Draco in the past are disturbed by the Eternal Vigilance plans. And Draco himself, Alara inquired. Any reaction to his brief capture and the data theft? He's gone silent, Dax reported, a note of concern in her voice. No public appearances or statements since returning from the station. Our intelligence suggests he's accelerating the Eternal Vigilance timeline, possibly in response to the data breach. How much time do we have? Saul asked. Based on the information you recovered, we estimate 36 hours before the weapons platforms achieve operational status. If Draco is indeed accelerating the schedule, it could be even less. The implications hung heavily in the air. If the Assembly representatives failed to act decisively after reviewing the evidence, if there was too much debate or hesitation, millions of lives could be lost. What can we do from here? Alara asked, frustration evident in her tone. They had accomplished their mission, obtained the crucial evidence, but now found themselves stranded at a critical moment. Focus on survival and preparing for extraction, Dax instructed. You've done your part by securing the evidence. Now it's my responsibility to ensure it reaches the right people and produces the necessary action. And if it doesn't, Keto pressed. What's the contingency plan you mentioned earlier? There was a brief hesitation before Dax responded. The Undying Soldiers have assets positioned near each of the weapons platforms. If political solutions fail, we are prepared to take direct action to prevent civilian casualties, even at significant cost to ourselves. No one needed elaboration on what significant cost meant in this context. Attacking military installations would be suicide missions for those involved, classified as acts of terrorism, regardless of their necessity or the lives they saved. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Saul said quietly. Indeed, Dax agreed. I'll maintain contact and update you on developments. In the meantime, make what repairs you can to your vessel as a precaution. Dax out. The communication ended, leaving them to contemplate their situation and the events unfolding beyond their reach. Despite the success of their mission, there was a sense of helplessness in being removed from the action at such a critical juncture. We should organize ourselves, Keto suggested, breaking the silence. Establish watches, begin assessment for possible repairs, inventory supplies more thoroughly. The practical tasks provided focus, a way to channel their energy and concern productively. They divided responsibilities based on expertise. Talia and the pilot would assess repair possibilities, for the vessel Vex would work on improving the outpost's communications and monitoring systems, while Keto, Saul, and Alara would handle security supplies and overall coordination. As the others dispersed to their assigned tasks, Alara found herself alone with Sul for the first time since before the mission. They stood in the observation dome at the top of the outpost, watching the slow dance of asteroids against the backdrop of distant stars. "We did it," she said softly. "We got the evidence. Whatever happens now, at least the truth is out there." "Yes," Sul agreed, though his expression remained troubled. "But at what cost, and will it be enough?" "You're thinking about Dax's contingency plan." "Among other things." He turned to face her fully. "I dragged you into this, Alara. When I revealed myself at the cemetery, I could have just given you the information I had and let you decide what to do with it. Instead, I pulled you into a conflict that might still end in disaster despite everything we've accomplished." "You didn't drag me anywhere," she corrected him firmly. "I made my own choices every step of the way, and I'd make them again. Even knowing where we'd end up, stranded in an abandoned mining outpost, waiting to hear if our efforts will prevent mass murder, or simply delay it." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Because the alternative was continuing to live with the lie. That you died a hero's death, that the system worked, that the peace we fought for was real. I'd rather face this truth, however painful or dangerous, than live comfortably with that lie. Sol's expression softened, the troubled furrow of his brow easing slightly. I've missed that about you. Your absolute moral clarity. Even in the worst situations, you always see the right path forward. Not always, she admitted. There were many times during these past 7 years when I lost my way, when I questioned everything I'd believed, in everything I'd fought for. What kept you going? She considered the question, searching for the honest answer, rather than the easy one. Stubbornness, partly, she said with a small smile. But also, the promise I made to you even though I thought you were dead. To find the truth about what happened during those final days of the war, to honor the sacrifices made by exposing the corruption that undermined them. And now, he asked quietly, what keeps you going now? Alara met his gaze directly. Hope, she replied simply. For the first time in 7 years, I have hope, for justice, for a better future. For us. The admission hung between them, an echo of conversations left unfinished before the Red Dawn battle of possibilities, interrupted by war and deception and years of separation. Saul moved closer, his hand finding hers. When this is over, he said, his voice low and intent. If we survive what's coming. When this is over, Alara corrected gently. When we survive what's coming, we'll build that cabin on Nebulon 5. And maybe finally learn what peace actually feels like. His fingers tightened around hers, a silent promise. For a moment they stood together in perfect understanding, finding in each other's presence a sanctuary amidst the uncertainty surrounding them. The moment was interrupted by Keto's voice over the outpost's communication system. Everyone to the control center. We're receiving a priority transmission from Haven. They hurried to respond, finding the others already gathered around the communication console when they arrived. General Dax's voice came through, her tone urgent, but controlled. The Assembly representatives have reviewed the evidence, she reported without preamble. They've called for an immediate closed session to present the findings to the full Assembly and vote on removing Draco from power. That's good news, Saul said cautiously. Isn't it? Potentially, Dax acknowledged. But there's a complication. Draco has deployed Ghost Legion units to secure the Assembly building ostensibly in response to terrorist threats. In reality, he's attempting to control who enters and exits, possibly to prevent the evidence from being presented. Has he been informed of the representative's actions? Alara asked. We believe so. Our intelligence indicates unusual activity at his headquarters and at key Ghost Legion facilities. He appears to be accelerating preparations for something significant. The Eternal Vigilance timeline, Keto surmised grimly. He's moving up the schedule, isn't he? That's our assessment, Dax confirmed. Which is why we're implementing our contingency plan effective immediately. Undying soldier cells across the Federation are moving into position to neutralize the weapons platforms before they can become operational. And the Assembly, Saul inquired. Will they still vote if they know military action is being taken independently? That's the delicate balance we're navigating, Dax replied, her decades of political and military experience evident in her measured tone. The representatives need to understand the urgency without feeling that their authority is being undermined. The ideal outcome is simultaneous action, political condemnation of Draco through official channels, while we prevent his plan from being executed. What can we do from here? Alara asked, the enforced inaction chafing at her sense of duty. Maintain your position and prepare for extraction, Dax instructed. But there is one additional task you can assist with. The mining outpost's communication relay, if fully activated, could help us coordinate our operations across multiple sectors. Vex, can you bring it to full power? Possibly, Vex replied, considering the technical challenges. The system is outdated but robust. With some modifications, I could expand its range and security protocols. Do it, Dax ordered. I'm transmitting encryption codes and frequency information now. We'll need the relay operational within 6 hours to coordinate the final phase of our response. While Vex set to work on the communication relay with Talia's assistance, the others continued monitoring the limited information coming through about events unfolding across the Federation. Reports were fragmented and sometimes contradictory, but a picture gradually emerged of escalating tensions in multiple sectors. Ghost Legion forces, mobilizing unusual fleet movements, increased security at government facilities. "He's preparing for resistance," Saul observed as they analyzed the reports. "Draco knows his plans have been exposed at least partially, and he's positioning his forces to maintain control regardless of what the Assembly decides." "A preemptive coup," Alara suggested. "Taking direct military control before political processes can remove him from power." "Which means the next few hours will determine everything," Keto added. "Either Draco succeeds in consolidating control through force, or he's removed and his plans prevented." The hours that followed were a strange mix of frantic activity and tense waiting. Vex and Talia worked continuously on the communication relay, making remarkable progress, despite the limited resources available. The others assisted where possible, but much of their time was spent monitoring the increasingly alarming reports from across the Federation. Approximately 4 hours after Dax's communication, Vex announced success. "The relay is operational at 87% capacity. Not perfect, but sufficient for the coordination requirements. I'm establishing the encrypted channels now." Almost immediately, the enhanced relay began receiving tactical information. Undying soldier cells reporting positions, identifying targets, requesting final authorization before engaging. It was the preparations for what would essentially be a synchronized strike against military installations across multiple worlds, a desperate gamble to prevent an even greater catastrophe. Amid these tactical communications came an unexpected message: a live broadcast from the Federal Assembly, where the emergency session had finally convened despite Draco's attempts to delay or control it. They gathered around the visual display, watching as the Assembly Speaker called the session to order, her expression grave, as she announced the purpose to review evidence of criminal conspiracy, abuse of power, and preparation for illegal military action against Federation citizens by Commander Draco Valen. The camera panned to show General Dax standing at the podium, her posture ramrod straight, her silver-streaked hair gleaming under the chamber lights. She wore her full military dress uniform, complete with the medals and commendations earned during her distinguished career, presenting a powerful visual reminder of her authority and credibility. "Honorable representatives," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I come before you today, not as a retired officer seeking to interfere in political matters, but as a citizen fulfilling her oath to protect the Federation from threats, both external and internal. What I am about to present is evidence of the most serious nature. Proof that Commander Draco Valen, entrusted with our security, has secretly prepared a plan for martial law, enforced through orbital strikes against civilian targets." There were gasps and murmurs among the assembled representatives as Dax presented the Eternal Vigilance files, displaying the targeting coordinates and implementation timeline on the chamber's main screen. She explained the origin of the evidence, recovered from Draco's own secure data core, and provided authentication details that would allow independent verification of its authenticity. "These are not the actions of a security officer protecting the Federation," Dax continued, her voice hardening with controlled anger. "These are the preparations of a would-be dictator, willing to murder thousands of citizens to maintain his grip on power. I call upon this assembly to immediately remove Commander Valen from all positions of authority, freeze all Ghost Legion operations, and place both Draco and his senior officers under arrest, pending full investigation and trial." The camera shifted to show the representatives' reactions: shock, disbelief, anger, and in some cases a calculating assessment of political implications. Then, it moved to focus on an empty seat, the position reserved for Commander Valen during assembly sessions. "The commander has been invited to respond to these accusations," the speaker announced, but has declined to appear, citing security concerns. However, He has submitted a statement to be read into the record. A parliamentary aide approached the podium, with a datapad handing it to the speaker, who began to read. Honorable representatives, I regret that I cannot address you in person due to credible threats against the Assembly by terrorist elements. The so-called evidence presented by General Dax is a sophisticated fabrication created by Ghost Legion deserters and their allies in the terrorist organization known as the Undying Soldiers. The operational plans referenced are contingency measures against external threats, not domestic targets, and have been deliberately altered to create this false impression. I urge the Assembly to reject these baseless accusations and instead focus on the real danger, a coordinated attack against Federation security installations that our intelligence indicates is imminent. I have ordered increased security measures to protect vital infrastructure and government facilities, and I request emergency authorization to expand these measures as needed to maintain public safety during this crisis. With respect and loyalty to the Federation Commander, Draco Valen Security Council Chairman. When the speaker finished reading, a moment of silence fell over the chamber representatives processing the conflicting narratives and considering their response. Then, one by one, questions began. Representatives demanding more details about the evidence, asking about verification methods, inquiring about Draco's current location and activities. General Dax answered each question directly, providing additional context and supporting documentation. As the questioning continued, it became increasingly clear that many representatives found her evidence compelling and Draco's absence suspicious. Finally, the speaker called for a preliminary vote, whether to temporarily suspend Commander Valen from his position pending further investigation. The voting process began, representatives registering their positions electronically, the results displaying in real time on the chamber's main screen. The broadcast suddenly cut out, replaced by a standard emergency notification graphic and automated voice. We interrupt this transmission for an important security announcement. Reports of terrorist activity have been confirmed in multiple sectors. Citizens are advised to remain in their homes and follow all instructions from security personnel. Normal broadcasting will resume when the situation permits. They're censoring the Assembly broadcast, Keto said in disbelief. Draco must still control the primary communication networks. Can we get it back? Saul asked Vex, who was already working at the communication controls. I'm trying to access alternative channels, he replied, fingers moving rapidly across the interface. There are still some independent feeds operating on secondary frequencies. After several tense moments, a new image appeared on their display, grainier than the official broadcast with occasional signal degradation, but showing the assembly chamber from a different angle. The voting appeared to be complete, with the speaker preparing to announce the results. The preliminary vote stands at 217 in favor 83, opposed with 12 abstentions, she declared. The motion to temporarily suspend Commander Valen from all official duties and authorize an immediate investigation into the presented evidence is approved. A collective cheer erupted from those watching in the mining outpost. The first decisive political action against Draco, a validation of their mission and the risks they had taken. But their celebration was premature. Even as the speaker moved to the next item on the emergency agenda, the appointment of an interim security coordinator, alarms began sounding throughout the assembly chamber. The independent feed captured representatives looking around in confusion, security personnel rushing to secure the speaker and other leadership in a general atmosphere of growing panic. Then, a new voice came over the assembly's communication system. Attention all representatives. This is Colonel Jarvis of the Ghost Legion Special Security Division. The assembly building has been surrounded due to confirmed terrorist threats. For your safety, please remain in your seats and await escort to secure transportation. This is not a drill. He's making his move, Saul said grimly. Using the Ghost Legion to detain the assembly members before they can implement their vote or appoint a replacement. This is exactly the scenario Dax was preparing for. Alara noted her tactical mind, already assessing options and likely outcomes. Which means, as if in response to her unfinished thought, A series of urgent communications began flowing through the relay. Undying soldier cells reporting that they were initiating operations against the weapons platforms, no longer waiting for political resolution, since Draco had effectively staged a coup against the assembly itself. The independent feed from the assembly showed increasing chaos. Some representatives protesting the Ghost Legion's intervention, others apparently cooperating security personnel, divided in their loyalties. General Dax was no longer visible, having either been detained or escaped during the initial confusion. Then, the feed cut out entirely, leaving them with only the tactical communications from undying soldier cells and occasional emergency broadcasts that provided little substantive information. "What now?" Keto asked, voicing the question they were all considering. "We continue as ordered," Saul replied, after a moment of consideration. "Maintain the communication relay, coordinate the operations against the weapons platforms as best we can from here, and prepare for extraction. While the Federation potentially descends into civil war," Talia added, her tone somber. "Not civil war," Alara corrected. "Resistance against an illegal seizure of power. There's a difference, one that will matter in whatever comes after." The next several hours were a blur of activity, as they used the relay to coordinate operations across multiple sectors. Reports came in of undying soldier cells engaging Ghost Legion forces at the weapons platform sites. Some successful in neutralizing their targets, others meeting heavy resistance, a few going silent after initial contact, their fate unknown. Interspersed with these tactical updates were fragments of information about the broader situation. Ghost Legion units securing government facilities in major cities, military commanders declaring allegiance either to the Assembly or to Draco civilian populations, largely confused and frightened by the conflicting messages and visible security presence. Through it all, there was no word from General Dax. Her last known position had been the Assembly chamber, but whether she had been captured, gone into hiding, or was actively leading resistance elsewhere remained unknown. "We're making progress," Saul reported, after analyzing the latest updates. 17 of the 23 primary weapons platforms have been neutralized or confirmed non-operational. The remaining 6 are either heavily defended or in sectors where our forces have limited presence. "And the political situation?" Alara asked. "Less clear." Keto admitted, reviewing the fragmented information available. "Draco appears to control the capital and major command centers, but his authority is being challenged in at least 7 sectors, where military commanders have declared support for the Assembly's vote to suspend him. So we've prevented the worst-case scenario, the simultaneous orbital strikes, but haven't resolved the underlying power struggle," Alara summarized. "Exactly," Sol agreed. "And without clear political leadership, this could devolve into exactly what Talia suggested, a prolonged conflict between those loyal to Draco and those supporting the Assembly and constitutional authority." Further discussion was interrupted by an alert from the vessel docked at the outpost. The pilot, who had been continuing repair efforts throughout the crisis, appeared in the control center with unexpected news. "I've managed to restore partial propulsion capability," he announced. "Not enough for sustained flight or anything approaching normal speed, but possibly sufficient to reach the outer edge of the asteroid field, where extraction would be easier." This development prompted urgent reconsideration of their situation. Remaining at the mining outpost provided a stable position and continued access to the communication relay, but also kept them static and potentially vulnerable if Draco's forces determined their location. Moving toward the edge of the asteroid field would complicate extraction, but might increase their chances of ultimately reaching safety. "We should split our resources," Saul decided, after weighing the options. "Vex stays here with minimal support to maintain the relay as long as possible. The rest of us take the vessel and attempt to reach a more accessible extraction point." "I'll stay with Vex," Talia volunteered immediately. "2 people can defend this position if necessary, and I can assist with maintaining the communication systems." The plan agreed upon, they began preparations for departure. Gathering essential supplies, transferring key data to portable devices, ensuring Vex and Talia would have everything needed to sustain their position for at least a week. As they worked, a new transmission came through the relay, this one on a highly encrypted channel used exclusively by General Dax herself. The message was brief, but electrifying. Operation Phoenix initiating at 0600 Federation Standard Time. All cells confirm readiness for coordinated action. Primary target secured. Await further instructions on standard channels. Operation Phoenix, Keto questioned, looking to Saul. Was that in any of the briefings? Saul shook his head, his expression thoughtful. No, but the name suggests a contingency plan Dax kept in reserve. Something she implemented only after the situation at the assembly. And primary target secured, Alara mused. What would be considered the primary target in this context? Before anyone could offer theories, another alert sounded. This one from the outpost's perimeter sensors. Something was approaching through the asteroid field, its path too direct and purposeful to be natural debris. Contact incoming. Vex reported activating the external scanners. Single vessel military configuration, but no identification transponder active. Ghost Legion. Keto suggested, already moving toward the weapons locker. Unlikely, Saul replied, studying the sensor data. They would travel in pairs at minimum, and their approach would be more cautious if they suspected our presence. The extraction team isn't due for another 36 hours, Alara noted. Could Dax have sent someone earlier? Possible, Saul acknowledged. But until we confirm, we proceed with caution. They armed themselves and took defensive positions, monitoring the approaching vessel's trajectory. It maintained a direct course toward the outpost, suggesting it knew exactly where to find them, rather than conducting a general search pattern. As the vessel came within visual range, its design became apparent. A mid-sized personnel transport with modifications for enhanced speed and stealth capabilities, similar to those used by Undying soldiers for high-priority extractions. They're transmitting an identification code, Vex announced, checking it against their security protocols. It matches Undying soldiers' recognition patterns, but there's an additional verification sequence I don't recognize. Let me see, Saul requested, moving to examine the code. After a moment, his expression shifted from tension to surprise. It's authentic. In fact, it's a command-level authorization that only Dax and her most trusted lieutenants would have access to. So it is our extraction, Alara asked, still maintaining a cautious stance. Or someone who has obtained Dax's codes, Keto pointed out. We should remain alert until we confirm visually. The vessel docked with practiced precision, its airlock aligning with the outpost's external port. They maintained defensive positions as the connection was established and the airlock cycled. When the inner door finally opened, the person who stepped through was not someone they immediately recognized. A young lieutenant in a uniform without insignia, her expression professionally neutral as she scanned the reception area. Verification sequence Orion 7 Delta, she stated crisply. Response. Phoenix 9 Echo. Saul replied with the correct countersign. Identify yourself and your mission. Lieutenant Zara Chen, aide to General Corin Dax. She responded, relaxing slightly, now that initial verification was complete. I've been sent to extract key personnel for immediate transport to Operation Phoenix Command. Where is General Dax? Keto asked, still not entirely convinced. Secure and operational at the secondary command center, Lieutenant Chen replied. She specifically requested Major Voss and Captain Renard be brought to her location as soon as possible. Time is critical. Saul and Alara exchanged glances silently, evaluating the situation. The codes were authentic, the lieutenant's manner professional, and consistent with Undying soldiers' protocols, and the urgent nature of the request aligned with the operational update they had just received about Operation Phoenix. What about the others? Saul asked, indicating Keto, Vex, Talia, and the pilot. My orders are to extract you and Major Voss specifically, Chen explained. However, I'm authorized to transport anyone else who wishes to leave, with the understanding that they will be temporarily housed at a secure location, rather than brought directly to the command center. After brief discussion, they decided that Vex and Talia would remain at the outpost as planned, maintaining the communication relay for as long as possible, while Quito and the pilot would accompany Sol and Alara on the extraction vessel. "We can't abandon the relay entirely," Sol explained to Lieutenant Chen. "It's coordinating operations across multiple sectors, but we'll transfer primary functions to your vessel's communication systems before departure." Chen nodded, accepting the modification to her orders. "We need to depart within 30 minutes to maintain our mission timeline. Please gather only essential equipment and prepare for immediate transfer." The preparations were completed with military efficiency. Essential data transferred, final instructions given to Vex and Talia, and contingency plans established should communication be lost. When everything was ready, they boarded the extraction vessel, which disengaged from the outpost and began navigating back through the asteroid field with significantly greater speed and confidence than their damaged vessel could have managed. Once they were underway, Lieutenant Chen provided a more comprehensive briefing on the current situation. The news was both better and worse than they had pieced together from fragmentary reports. The good news is that Operation Phoenix has been largely successful in its initial phase, she explained, displaying tactical updates on the vessel's secure terminal. 21 of the 23 weapons platforms have been neutralized, and the remaining 2 are confirmed to be non-operational due to technical failures we induced in their targeting systems. "And the assembly?" Alara asked. "Approximately 2/3 of the representatives have been secured by forces loyal to the Constitution," Chen replied. "They've established a provisional government at a secure location and have been issuing directives to military and civilian authorities. Support for this provisional government is growing, particularly among career officers who resent Ghost Legion interference in the chain of command." "And Draco himself?" Sol inquired the critical question. Chen's expression tightened. "That's the less positive news. He escaped the capital before our forces could apprehend him, taking with him a core group of Ghost Legion loyalists and several specialized vessels. His current location is unknown, though we have intelligence suggesting he's establishing a fallback position in the outer colonies." "So he could potentially regroup and continue the conflict," Quito observed grimly. "That's what Operation Phoenix is designed to prevent," Chen confirmed. "General Dax has implemented a comprehensive strategy to isolate Draco from potential supporters, secure key military and communication assets, and establish clear legal authority for actions taken against him and his loyalists." "And our role in this operation?" Alara asked. "The General will brief you personally when we arrive. All I can tell you is that your experience with Ghost Legion protocols and your direct knowledge of Draco's methods make you particularly valuable for the next phase." The journey continued in relative silence. After this briefing, each person processing the implications of recent developments and preparing mentally for whatever challenges lay ahead. The extraction vessel maintained a cautious approach, occasionally altering course to avoid patrols or surveillance, but making steady progress toward its destination. Approximately 6 hours after departing the mining outpost, they began their final approach to what appeared to be an unremarkable moon, orbiting a gas giant in a system Alara didn't immediately recognize. As they drew closer, however, she noticed subtle signs of artificial structures integrated into the natural landscape. Landing pads disguised as impact craters, sensor arrays that mimicked native rock formations, and carefully concealed defensive positions. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Lieutenant Chen announced as they initiated landing procedures. "The heart of Operation Phoenix and General Dax's forward command center." The vessel descended toward what looked like a particularly large impact crater, but as they approached, sections of the surface retracted to reveal a sophisticated landing bay beneath. They touched down smoothly, the crater's covering sliding back into place above them, concealing their arrival from any potential observation. They were met by a small reception team who efficiently processed their arrival, confirming identities, providing basic orientation, and escorting them to a briefing room where General Dax awaited. The general looked tired, but composed, the events of recent days evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, but not in her posture or manner, which remained commanding and assured. She greeted them with formal courtesy, dismissing the escort team to speak with them privately. "I apologize for the abrupt extraction," she began once they were alone. "But events are moving rapidly, and your specific expertise is needed for our next objective." "We've been briefed on the general situation," Saul replied, "but the details of Operation Phoenix and our role remain unclear." Dax nodded, activating a holographic display that showed the current disposition of forces across the Federation. Areas controlled by the provisional government in green, Draco's remaining strongholds in red, and contested regions in yellow. The visualization made clear what Chen had reported: the provisional government controlled most core worlds and major military installations, while Draco's influence was now largely confined to certain outer colonies and specialized Ghost Legion facilities. "Operation Phoenix has 3 phases," Dax explained. "First, neutralize the immediate threat posed by the weapons platforms. Second, establish legitimate governmental authority and secure key infrastructure. Both of these phases are substantially complete, though consolidation continues." "And the third phase?" Alara asked, sensing this was where they would be involved. "Apprehend Draco and his key lieutenants to stand trial for their crimes," Dax stated simply. "Without their leadership, the remaining Ghost Legion loyalists will either surrender or be dealt with as isolated threats, rather than a coordinated opposition." "You've located Draco?" Saul asked, his interest sharpening. "We believe so," Dax confirmed, adjusting the display to focus on a remote system near the Federation's border with neutral space. "Intelligence indicates he's established a command post at this location, an automated mining facility converted for Ghost Legion use several years ago. It's heavily defended with multiple redundant systems and a complement of approximately 50 Ghost Legion operatives." "A direct assault would be costly," Alara observed, studying the facility's specifications. "Prohibitively so," Dax agreed. "Which is why we're not planning one. Instead, we propose a targeted infiltration by a small team with specific knowledge of Ghost Legion protocols and facility layouts." "Us," Saul concluded, unsurprised. "You two specifically," Dax confirmed. "Captain Renard's experience within Ghost Legion provides critical intelligence on their security systems and internal procedures. Major Voss's tactical expertise and proven ability to adapt to changing conditions make her the ideal partner for this operation." "Objective?" Alara asked, already mentally preparing for the mission. "Primary: capture Draco alive to stand trial, along with any senior commanders present. Secondary: secure any additional evidence or intelligence regarding Ghost Legion operations and contingency plans. Tertiary: disable the facility's defensive capabilities to allow subsequent forces to secure it completely." "Timeline?" Saul inquired. "Immediate," Dax replied grimly. "We've intercepted communications suggesting Draco is preparing to leave the facility within 48 hours, possibly to seek asylum beyond Federation jurisdiction. Once he crosses into neutral space, apprehending him becomes diplomatically and logistically complex." "How do we get in?" Alara asked the practical question. "A facility that, well defended, won't be easily approached." "That's where Captain Renard's Ghost Legion credentials become critical," Dax explained, bringing up schematics of a specialized transport vessel. "We've secured a Ghost Legion supply ship with valid authorization codes. You'll approach as a scheduled resupply mission, using the captain's credentials to bypass initial security. Once inside the landing bay, you'll need to proceed to the command center, where Draco is likely coordinating his next moves." "Extraction plan?" Saul asked, always thorough in his mission preparation. "Primary: return via the supply ship with prisoners secured. Backup emergency extraction team on standby at the edge of the system, ready to respond to any distress signal. Last resort facility contains several escape pods designed for emergency evacuation. Their launch would be detected, but they could provide emergency extraction if all other options fail." The briefing continued, with detailed analysis of the facility's layout, security protocols, known personnel, and potential complications. By the time it concluded, both Saul and Alara had a comprehensive understanding of the mission parameters and the critical importance of its success. Questions, Dax asked finally. 1. Alara said after a moment's consideration. What happens after assuming we succeed in capturing Draco and bringing him to trial? What's the endgame for the Federation, for the undying soldiers? It was the question that had been at the back of her mind since joining this conflict. Not just about ending Draco's corruption, but about what would replace it, whether the system could be truly reformed, or would simply see one power structure replaced by another. Dax seemed to understand the deeper implications of the question. The provisional government has already enacted several key reforms, she replied carefully. Increased transparency in military operations, civilian oversight of security functions, decentralization of emergency powers. The undying soldier's role is evolving from resistance to reconstruction. Many of our members will return to their former positions within legitimate institutions, bringing with them a commitment to the reforms we've fought for. And those who can't simply return, Saul asked clearly, including himself in this category. Those whose official deaths or other complications make reintegration impossible. There will be a process for that as well, Dax assured him. Formal recognition of the truth, restoration of identities and ranks, where appropriate compensation for those wrongfully declared dead or dishonorably discharged. It won't be immediate, but the provisional government has committed to addressing these injustices as part of the broader reconciliation process. The answers weren't perfect. No answers could be in a situation this complex, but they reflected a thoughtful approach to the challenges ahead and awareness that victory meant more than simply removing Draco from power. When do we depart? Alara asked, accepting the mission and its implications. The supply ship is being prepared now, Dax replied. You'll have 6 hours for personal preparation, equipment selection, and final briefings. Departure is scheduled for 400 hours. With the formal briefing concluded, they were escorted to temporary quarters, where they could rest and prepare. The facility provided everything they might need, from specialized equipment for the mission to the simple comfort of hot showers and clean clothes, luxuries they hadn't experienced since before their mission to the orbital station. Saul and Alara's quarters were adjacent, connected by a shared common area, where they could continue mission planning in privacy. After taking advantage of the opportunity to clean up and change, they met there to review details and discuss approach strategies. The supply ship credentials should get us through the outer security perimeter, Saul noted, studying the facility schematics. But once we're inside, we'll have limited time before someone recognizes that I'm not exactly a regular delivery pilot. How long? Alara asked, calculating timing for various scenarios. Depends on who's handling arrival processing, Saul replied. Best case 20 minutes before identity verification protocols flag discrepancies. Worst case immediate, if someone recognizes me personally. So we need to be prepared to move quickly, once inside, she concluded. Direct approach to the command center, minimal interaction with facility personnel. Exactly. And we'll need to appear as legitimate crew until we're forced to act otherwise. That means standard Ghost Legion protocols, proper documentation, correct terminology. They continued refining their approach, identifying critical decision points, establishing contingency plans, and preparing for various scenarios. It was familiar territory for both of them. The meticulous planning that preceded high-risk operations, the balance of preparation and adaptability that had kept them alive through countless missions during the war. As they worked, Alara found herself studying Saul in moments when his attention was focused elsewhere. Noting the changes 7 years had wrought, the new lines around his eyes, the increased tension in his posture, but also the core of him that remained unchanged, the strategic mind, the unwavering determination, the fundamental decency that had drawn her to him from their first meeting. What? He asked, catching her gaze during one such moment. Just thinking, she replied, not looking away. About how much has changed and how much hasn't. He set aside the tactical display he'd been reviewing, giving her his full attention. Having second thoughts about the mission, No, she said honestly. But I am thinking about what comes after. If we succeed, if Draco is brought to justice, and the Federation begins to heal, where do we fit into that future? It was the conversation they had been postponing. First, due to the immediate dangers they faced then, because of their separation at the mining outpost, and finally, because of the urgent mission preparations. But with departure only hours away, and the risks they were about to face, it could no longer be delayed. I meant what I said before, Sol told her, his voice softening from its professional tone. About the cabin on Nebulon 5. About wanting a life beyond war and conflict. But I understand if your perspective has changed, if 7 years of believing me dead and fighting your own battles has led you in a different direction. It hasn't, Alara said simply. Changed my perspective, I mean. If anything, it's clarified what matters. Before the Red Dawn battle, I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave military life behind to build something quieter. Now I know I am. I've seen enough of war and deception and power struggles to last several lifetimes. Relief and something deeper flickered across Sol's features. So after this mission, she confirmed. Assuming we both survive, I think we've earned that cabin by the lakes. Though I suspect neither of us will be content with complete retirement. There will be work to do in rebuilding what Draco and others like him have damaged. Consulting roles, Sol suggested with a hint of a smile. Advisory positions that don't involve being shot at or stranded in abandoned mining outposts. Exactly, Alara agreed, returning the smile. Though I reserve the right to occasionally miss the adrenaline rush of a well-executed mission. I'm sure we can find suitably exciting hobbies, Sol replied, his expression warming. Rock climbing, perhaps, or deep-sea exploration. Something challenging but with significantly lower chances of encountering Ghost Legion operatives. The moment of connection and shared vision of the future provided a necessary counterbalance to the tension of their impending mission. A reminder of what they were fighting for beyond the immediate objective of capturing Draco. Their preparation continued until it was time for final equipment check and deployment. They met Dax at the supply ship's loading bay, where specialized gear had been assembled for their mission. Modified Ghost Legion uniforms that would allow them to blend in at the facility, weapons with adjustable settings for either non-lethal or lethal force, as the situation required communication devices with encrypted channels back to Sanctuary, and various specialized tools for bypassing security systems or restraining prisoners. The supply ship is loaded according to standard Ghost Legion protocols, Dax informed them as they conducted final checks. Inventory manifests authorization codes, scheduled delivery route. Everything aligns with expected parameters for a routine resupply mission. The original crew has been fully debriefed, providing all necessary operational details to maintain the deception. Estimated travel time, Alara asked, adjusting the fit of her equipment. Approximately 14 hours at standard speed, Dax replied. You're scheduled to arrive during the facility's third shift when staffing is at minimum levels, and senior personnel, including Draco, are likely to be in the command center, rather than the landing bay. Any update on whether Draco suspects he's been located? Sol inquired, the critical question for their mission planning. Our intelligence suggests he believes his location remains secure, Dax assured them. He's continuing preparations for departure, but not with the urgency that would indicate knowledge of imminent threat. The scheduled supply delivery provides perfect cover precisely because it's routine and expected. With final instructions delivered and equipment secured, they boarded the supply ship, a utilitarian vessel designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with a small crew compartment, larger cargo hold, and basic but functional control systems. Sol took the pilot's position quickly, familiarizing himself with the slightly outdated interface, while Alara handled pre-launch checks and communication protocols. Supply vessel Hermes requesting departure clearance. Sol transmitted using the ship's designated call sign. Clearance granted Hermes, came the response from Sanctuary's control center. Mission parameters confirmed. Good hunting. The landing bay's concealed doors retracted once more, revealing the star-filled sky above. With practiced precision, Sol guided the vessel upward, engaging standard thrust once they cleared the moon's minimal atmosphere. As they set course for their destination, the supply ship's navigation system automatically engaged stealth protocols. Not full invisibility, which would be suspicious for a routine cargo vessel, but the standard emissions control and signature reduction that Ghost Legion utilized for all its support craft. Course laid in, Sol reported, as they reached cruise velocity. Estimated arrival at the facility in 14 hours, 7 minutes. All systems nominal. Now we wait, Alara said, settling into the co-pilot seat, and prepare for what happens when we arrive. The journey provided time for final mental preparation review of facility layouts and security protocols, and even brief periods of rest. A luxury they had learned to take advantage of whenever possible during their military careers. They alternated watch duties, ensuring one of them was always alert, and monitoring systems, while the other caught a few hours of sleep. As they neared their destination, both were fully rested and focused, the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over them. The facility came into view on their scanners first, a massive structure built into and around an asteroid that had once been valuable for its mineral content, but now served a far different purpose. Initiating approach protocol, Sol announced activating the specific communication frequency used by Ghost Legion supply vessels. Ghost Legion Facility Erebus. This is Supply Vessel Hermes requesting approach vector and docking authorization. Transmitting verification codes now. There was a brief pause, long enough for Alara's pulse to quicken slightly, before the response came through. Verification codes confirmed, Hermes. Proceed to approach Vector 117 Mark 42. Docking Bay 3 has been designated for your arrival. Transmitting guidance beacon. Sol acknowledged the instructions and adjusted their course accordingly, his expression revealing nothing of the tension they both felt. The facility's external defenses, automated weapons platforms, scanner arrays, patrol vessels, were now visible, a formidable perimeter that would have been nearly impossible to penetrate without valid credentials. So far so good, Alara murmured, as they passed the outer defensive ring without challenge. The easy part, Sol replied, his focus on maintaining the exact approach vector specified in their instructions. Remember, once we dock, we're officially on the clock. 20 minutes at best before someone notices discrepancies. As they drew closer, the facility's true scale became apparent. A sprawling complex of interconnected modules, reinforced defensive positions, and specialized sections dedicated to various Ghost Legion functions. Docking Bay 3 opened to receive them, massive doors retracting to reveal a well-maintained landing area, with several other vessels already secured. Sol guided their ship to the designated berth, with practiced precision, the docking clamps engaging with a solid thunk that resonated through the vessel's frame. Standard post-flight procedures followed. Engine shutdown system checks. Preparation of cargo manifests for inspection by facility personnel. Hermes docking complete, Sol reported through the communication system. Cargo ready for inspection and offload. Acknowledged, Hermes, came the response. Stand by for processing team. They moved to the cargo area, donning the final elements of their disguise. Caps pulled low to partially obscure their faces, postures adjusted to match the somewhat bored efficiency of regular supply crews. The cargo itself was genuine. Food supplies, equipment, parts, medical materials, and other necessities for a remote facility, all properly documented and arranged according to Ghost Legion protocols. The external hatch opened to admit the processing team. 3 Ghost Legion personnel in standard utility uniforms rather than combat gear, armed with sidearms, but primarily equipped with scanning devices and data pads for inventory verification. Manifest. The lead processor requested, his tone professionally disinterested. Sol handed over the datapad containing the detailed inventory, maintaining the casual confidence of someone who had performed this task countless times. Full manifest with priority items flagged. Med supplies in Section 3 need immediate transfer to cold storage. The processor nodded, beginning the standard verification procedure, while his colleagues moved deeper into the cargo hold to scan specific containers. It was routine, methodical, exactly what they had hoped for. First time on this route, the processor asked conversationally as he worked a standard security technique, disguised as small talk. Third run to Erebus. Saul replied with the appropriate level of familiarity, using the facility information they had been briefed on. Usually do the Cygnus sector loop, but they reassigned me after Torelli rotated to station duty. The name drop of a genuine Ghost Legion logistics officer was a calculated risk, but one that paid off as the processor nodded with recognition. Torelli got station duty, lucky bastard. Been stuck on processing for 8 months now. The brief exchange established credibility, while the verification continued. 5 minutes passed, then 10, the process proceeding without incident, as containers were scanned and checked against the manifest. Everything matches. The processor finally announced, returning the datapad with the necessary clearance codes. Offload team will be here in about 20 minutes. You know the drill. Crew lounge is available if you need refreshment before departure. Appreciated, Saul replied, accepting the datapad. Estimated turnaround time, we're scheduled for a pickup at Outpost 7 after this. Should be clear within 2 hours, the processor said with a shrug. Unless the commander decides he needs something special loaded. Never can tell these days. The casual reference to Draco was valuable confirmation that he was indeed present at the facility. Saul acknowledged the information with a disinterested nod, maintaining his cover as the processing team departed. Once they were alone, Alara and Saul exchanged a brief glance of mutual understanding. The initial phase had been successful, but the critical part of their mission was just beginning. They needed to move quickly, reaching the command center before the inevitable security verification flagged Saul's credentials as anomalous. Offload team in 20 minutes, Alara noted quietly. That's our window to disappear from the docking bay, without raising immediate alarms. Agreed, Saul responded, already moving to a secured compartment, hidden within the cargo area. Time to switch to Phase 2. The compartment contained their specialized equipment, more advanced weapons than the standard sidearms they currently carried, communication devices linked to the extraction team, waiting at the edge of the system, and most importantly, a compact device that would temporarily disrupt the facility's internal tracking systems when activated. They quickly added these items to their existing gear, concealing them within their uniforms to maintain their cover until they reached the vicinity of the command center. Saul studied the facility schematic one final time, committing the optimal route to memory. Primary access corridor from Docking Bay 3 to Central Hub. He recited, tracing the path mentally. Through Maintenance Section 5 to the Security Bypass Junction, then Service Lift to Command Level. Approximately 12 minutes transit time, if we maintain casual pace and avoid unnecessary interaction. And if we encounter resistance? Alara asked, checking her weapon. Contingent on location and personnel involved, Saul replied pragmatically. Non-lethal approaches where possible to avoid triggering facility-wide alarms, but mission success takes priority. Draco cannot be allowed to escape. With their plan confirmed, they exited the supply ship, moving with purposeful efficiency that would not attract undue attention. The docking bay was relatively quiet. A few maintenance technicians working on other vessels, automated cargo systems preparing for their ship's offload, security cameras, maintaining standard surveillance patterns. They proceeded to the main access corridor, using the authorization codes from their cover identities, to pass through the initial checkpoint without incident. The facility's interior was utilitarian, but well-maintained. Modular corridors with clear directional indicators, occasional status displays, showing security levels and operational information, personnel moving about with the focused intensity common to military installations. They maintained a careful balance, moving steadily toward their objective, without the haste that might draw attention, acknowledging other personnel with appropriate familiarity, but avoiding conversation that could expose their deception. It was a skill, Both had perfected during countless covert operations during the war, the ability to be simultaneously visible and forgettable. The central hub presented the first significant challenge, a busy nexus where multiple corridors intersected with increased security presence and more personnel traffic. They separated slightly as they entered, creating natural distance that would avoid the appearance of a coordinated team while allowing them to cover different angles. Alara noted the security station at the hub's center. Two Ghost Legion operatives monitoring access to restricted areas, checking identification, and controlling the flow of personnel. Their current credentials would pass basic scrutiny, but might not hold up to the more detailed verification these operators could perform. A moment of inspiration struck her. Approaching a supply management terminal, she entered a series of codes from their briefing materials, initiating what would appear to be a routine inventory query. When the terminal responded with the expected error message, she made a show of mild frustration, then caught the eye of Sol across the hub with a subtle signal. Understanding immediately, Sol adjusted his course, approaching the security station with datapad in hand, presenting himself as a slightly harried supply officer dealing with system issues. "Need a verification override," he said to the operators, his tone conveying the perfect blend of routine annoyance and professional courtesy. "Inventory system is flagging discrepancies with our manifest that were already cleared at docking." As one of the operators began addressing this fabricated issue, Ilara moved past the security station with a casual nod, using their distraction to enter the corridor leading to Maintenance Section 5, without undergoing additional verification. Sol would follow once his interaction was complete, the brief separation allowing them both to pass with minimum scrutiny. The maintenance section was less populated, primarily occupied by technical staff focused on equipment rather than security. They reunited at a junction where service corridors branched in multiple directions, confirming their position against the memorized schematic. 8 minutes since leaving the ship, Ilara noted quietly. Still within the estimated window before credential flags. "This way," Sol directed, indicating a narrow service passage that would lead them to the security bypass junction, a critical network node where they could access the service lift to the command level without triggering the automatic identification protocols that governed the main lifts. The service passage was dimly lit and clearly less frequently used than the main corridors, allowing them to move more rapidly without concern for casual observation. They encountered no one until they reached the security bypass junction itself, where a single technician was conducting routine maintenance on a system panel. Sol approached from behind, applying a precisely calculated nerve pressure that rendered the technician unconscious without injury or alarm. They secured him in a nearby storage compartment using restraints that would hold but not cause harm, and proceeded to the service lift access point. "Disruption device?" Ilara asked, as Sol worked on the lift's control panel, bypassing its standard security protocols. "Not yet," he replied, focused on his task. "We activate that only when we reach the command level. Using it earlier would trigger facility-wide security protocols immediately." The panel yielded to his expertise, the service lift doors sliding open to reveal a utilitarian cabin designed for maintenance equipment rather than personnel transport. They entered quickly, Sol inputting the override code that would take them directly to the command level, without the usual authentication requirements. As the lift ascended, they made final preparations, checking weapons, confirming the disruption device was ready for activation, mentally reviewing the command level layout, and likely positioning of personnel, including Draco himself. "Remember," Sol said quietly, "Draco is the primary target. Whatever else happens, he cannot be allowed to escape or transmit orders for retaliation against civilian targets." Ilara nodded, her focus absolute. "Capture if possible, neutralize if necessary." The lift slowed as it reached the command level, the subtle change in momentum, signaling that the moment of truth was upon them. They positioned themselves on either side of the doors, weapons ready, but not yet drawn, prepared to assess and respond to whatever situation awaited. The doors opened to reveal a narrow maintenance corridor running parallel to the main command level facilities. It was unoccupied, just as their intelligence had suggested it would be during this shift rotation. They moved out quickly, but cautiously, proceeding toward the access point that would lead them to the command center itself. "Activate disruption now," Alara asked, as they reached the final junction before the command center entrance. Saul checked the time since their arrival. "Yes. We're beyond the window for normal credential verification. Stealth is no longer our primary advantage." He activated the device, which emitted a specialized electromagnetic pulse, designed to temporarily disable the facility's internal tracking and communication systems, without affecting critical life support or structural integrity components. The lights flickered momentarily, and nearby status displays went blank as the disruption took effect. "We have approximately 3 minutes before emergency systems restore partial functionality," Saul noted. "Direct approach now." They drew their weapons and moved with swift precision toward the command center entrance. A reinforced door, with dual security protocols that would normally require both identification verification and command authorization. With the disruption in effect, however, the electronic components of the security system were temporarily offline, leaving only the physical locking mechanism. Saul applied a specialized breaching charge to the lock, designed to neutralize it, with minimal noise or collateral damage. The charge detonated with a muffled thump, and the door mechanism released, allowing them to push through into the command center itself. The scene that greeted them was one of controlled chaos. Approximately a dozen Ghost Legion personnel at various stations, temporarily disoriented by the sudden systems failure, but already implementing emergency protocols with professional efficiency. At the center of the room, standing before a large tactical display, was Commander Draco Valen himself, issuing rapid orders to restore critical functions. Their entrance did not go unnoticed. A security officer near the door reached for his weapon, but Alara was faster, firing a precisely aimed stun pulse that dropped him before he could raise the alarm. The distinctive sound caught the attention of everyone in the room, including Draco, who turned to face the intrusion with remarkable composure. "Command center secured," Saul announced loudly, his weapon trained on Draco, while Alara covered the remaining personnel. "All stations stand down. This facility is now under the authority of the Federation Provisional Government." For a moment, no one moved, the Ghost Legion operatives assessing the threat and calculating their options. Then Draco laughed, a short, harsh sound entirely devoid of humor. "The famous dead man returns," he said, recognizing Saul despite the years and changes. "And Major Voss as well. I must admit I underestimated your persistence." "Commander Draco Valen," Alara stated formally, "you are relieved of command and placed under arrest for crimes against the Federation, including conspiracy, murder, abuse of power, and preparation for illegal military action against civilian targets." Several of the Ghost Legion operatives exchanged uncertain glances, the formal charges clearly news to them. Draco noted their reaction and moved to counter it. "Don't be fooled by terrorist propaganda," he advised his personnel. "These individuals are part of the Undying Soldiers insurrection that has been spreading false information to destabilize legitimate authority. Their presence here only confirms the threat we face." "The evidence has already been presented to the Federation Assembly," Saul countered, maintaining his aim on Draco. "The weapons platforms have been neutralized. A provisional government has been established with the support of military and civilian leaders across the Federation. Your Ghost Legion loyalists are surrounded and outnumbered. This is over, Draco." Uncertainty continued to spread among the command center personnel, some clearly reassessing their position, as this new information challenged what they had been told. Draco, however, remained unfazed, his posture relaxed despite the weapon trained on him. "An impressive performance," he acknowledged with cold appreciation. "But ultimately futile. You see, I've prepared for this eventuality. Ghost Legion Protocol, Omega Authorization, Draco 770. The command spoken in a clear, carrying voice, triggered an immediate response from several operatives, who moved with sudden coordination, revealing themselves as Draco's most loyal supporters. Before Saul or Alara could react effectively, these operatives had drawn concealed weapons and positioned themselves protectively around Draco. Simultaneously, a hidden door in the command center wall slid open, revealing an escape route that intelligence had not identified. Draco moved toward it with practiced efficiency, his loyal guards providing covering fire that forced Saul and Alara to take defensive positions. Facility self-destruct sequence initiated, announced an automated voice over the emergency communication system. 15 minutes to complete evacuation. This is not a drill. The announcement created instant chaos as personnel not directly loyal to Draco responded to the existential threat, abandoning their stations and moving toward emergency exits. The disruption gave Draco and his guards the opportunity to retreat through the hidden door, which began to close automatically behind them. "He's getting away!" Alara shouted, firing suppressive shots toward the remaining guards, while attempting to move toward the escape route. "The self-destruct is the priority," Saul responded, already moving to the central command console. "If this facility detonates, it could kill everyone aboard and potentially trigger deadman protocols at other Ghost Legion installations." A tactical dilemma faced them. Pursue Draco immediately, potentially allowing the self-destruct sequence to continue, or abort the self-destruct first, likely allowing Draco to escape, but saving the lives of everyone in the facility, including many who were simply following orders, rather than willing conspirators. "Go after Draco," Saul decided, making the split-second judgment. "I'll handle the self-destruct. Meet at Extraction Point Alpha if we're separated." Alara nodded, trusting his expertise with Ghost Legion systems and recognizing the logic of dividing their efforts. She fired several precise shots that neutralized the remaining guards blocking her path, then sprinted toward the closing escape door, sliding through the narrowing gap moments before it sealed completely. Beyond was a narrow corridor clearly designed for emergency evacuation, with directional lighting indicating the path to what was likely a private escape vessel. Alara moved swiftly, but cautiously aware that Draco and his guards had only a short head start. The corridor curved and descended, eventually opening into a small, specialized hangar containing a single vessel. Sleek, heavily armed and clearly designed for rapid escape and extended independent operation. Draco and 3 guards were already boarding the vessel's systems, coming online for immediate departure. Draco Alara called, taking position behind a structural support with her weapon ready. "There's nowhere to go. Federation forces control all major systems. Surrender now, and you'll receive a fair trial." One of the guards turned and fired in her direction, the energy pulse impacting near her position with enough force to send fragments of wall material flying. Alara returned fire with precisely aimed shots, dropping the guard with a stun pulse to the chest. The exchange drew Draco's attention. Rather than continuing immediately to the vessel, he paused, studying her with an expression of cold calculation. "Major Voss," he said, his tone conversational despite the circumstances. "Always the dutiful soldier. Tell me, when you learned Renard was alive, did you ever question why I allowed you to continue your investigation all those years? Why you were never silently eliminated like so many others who asked uncomfortable questions?" The question was clearly designed to create doubt, to disrupt her focus at a critical moment. Alara refused to engage with a psychological tactic, maintaining her combat stance and steady aim. "You're under arrest, Commander," she repeated, beginning to move laterally to gain a better firing position. "Order your remaining guards to stand down." "I kept you alive because you were useful," Draco continued, ignoring her demand. A decorated war hero publicly questioning certain aspects of the official narrative, but never getting close to the real truth. Your limited descent provided perfect cover for the elimination of more dangerous threats. You were unknowingly one of my most effective tools. Another of the guards attempted to target her while Draco spoke, but Alara anticipated the move, shifting position and firing first. The guard collapsed, leaving only Draco and one final protector. "This facility will self-destruct in 12 minutes," the automated system announced. "Proceed to emergency evacuation points immediately." "Your manipulations don't matter now," Alara responded, finally addressing Draco's claims. "What matters is that you face justice for your crimes. The weapons platforms targeting civilian populations, the assassinations disguised as heroic deaths, the war profiteering, all of it will be exposed in a public trial." Draco smiled thinly. "You assume there will be a stable government remaining to conduct such a trial. The Ghost Legion is more extensive than you realize, Major. What you've uncovered is merely one facet of a far larger design. The disruption you've caused is temporary, a setback, not an ending." The remaining guard used this exchange to position himself between Draco and Alara, weapon raised. "Commander, the vessel is ready. We need to depart immediately." Draco nodded, taking a step backward toward the vessel's entrance ramp. "A pity we couldn't continue this conversation under better circumstances, Major. Perhaps in another life, you might have understood the necessity of my actions." Alara recognized the immediate threat. If Draco reached the vessel and managed to launch, he could potentially escape beyond Federation space, taking with him critical intelligence and the capability to eventually reconstruct his power base. The remaining guard was positioned to provide covering fire, making a direct assault risky. A tactical solution presented itself, not targeting Draco or the guard directly, but instead the vessel's external fuel coupling visible from her position. A precisely aimed shot could render the vessel temporarily inoperable, without triggering a catastrophic explosion that might damage the facility's structural integrity. She adjusted her aim slightly and fired. The energy pulse struck the coupling with surgical precision, causing it to rupture and spray highly pressurized fuel across the hangar floor. Secondary automatic safety systems immediately initiated sealing the breach, but also locking down the vessel's propulsion system until proper repairs could be completed. A process that would take far longer than the remaining time before facility self-destruct. The guard fired in retaliation, forcing Alara to take cover. When she re-emerged to return fire, she found that Draco had abandoned the disabled vessel and was retreating toward a secondary exit, likely leading to alternative escape pods. She pursued, exchanging fire with the guard, who was providing rear protection for Draco's retreat. The chase led through a series of maintenance corridors, the facility's emergency lighting casting harsh shadows that complicated targeting for both sides. Self-destruct sequence in 8 minutes. The automated system continued its countdown, adding urgency to the already tense pursuit. Alara calculated her options, recognizing that time was becoming a critical factor. She needed to capture Draco and return to the extraction point before the facility's destruction, assuming Saul had been unable to abort the sequence. A moment of opportunity presented itself when the guard paused to access a security door, momentarily exposing himself. Alara took the shot, her pulse striking him squarely between the shoulder blades. He collapsed the security door, only partially opened. Draco, now without protection, found himself trapped between the malfunctioning door and Alara's unwavering aim. For the first time, his composed facade showed cracks, frustration, and something approaching fear briefly visible before control reasserted itself. "It seems you have me at a disadvantage, Major," he acknowledged, raising his hands slowly. "Though I should point out that capturing me is meaningless if we both perish in the imminent destruction." "The facility self-destruct has been aborted," came Saul's voice, suddenly through Alara's communication device. "Repeat, self-destruct sequence has been terminated. Security systems are coming back online under our control. What's your status?" Relief washed through Alara, though her aim remained steady. "I have Draco contained near emergency exit beta. One prisoner for transport." "Understood," Saul replied. "Security team en route to your position. Hold there." Draco's expression shifted as he processed this development, the failure of his final fallback plan. For a moment, Alara thought he might attempt something desperate, despite the hopelessness of his position. Instead, a strange calm settled over him. "You think this is victory," he said quietly. "But you've merely created a vacuum that others will fill. The Federation was dying long before I took action to preserve what could be saved. My methods may have been extreme, but my diagnosis was correct. Remember that, Major, when what follows proves worse than what you've ended. Save it for your trial, Commander." Alara responded unmoved by his attempt to justify his actions. "The Federation will survive your betrayal, and justice will be served." The security team arrived moments later. Not Ghost Legion operatives, but undying soldiers, who had apparently been standing by for extraction. They secured Draco with specialized restraints, designed to neutralize any hidden devices or suicide mechanisms, treating him with professional detachment, rather than the vengeful treatment he might have expected. "Major." The team leader greeted Alara with respect. "Captain Renard requests your presence in the command center. The facility is secure, and evacuation of non-essential personnel is underway. The provisional government has dispatched transport vessels for prisoners and evidence collection." Draco was led away under heavy guard, his final glance at Alara, containing neither remorse nor defeat, but rather a cold certainty that history would vindicate him. She dismissed the look, focusing instead on the reality of their success. The primary mission objective achieved, the facility secured, and no casualties among the personnel who had been following orders, rather than willing conspirators. When she reached the command center, she found Saul coordinating with both on-site security teams and remote command elements via the newly restored communication systems. He looked up as she entered, relief visible in his expression. "Draco," he asked simply. "In custody and secured for transport," she confirmed. "Your timing with the self-destruct abort was impeccable. Ghost Legion systems are complex, but follow predictable patterns if you know what to look for," he explained with modest understatement. "Once I identified the primary authorization sequence reversing, it was relatively straightforward." Around them, the command center was now a hub of orderly activity, as undying soldiers worked alongside cooperative facility personnel to secure systems, gather intelligence from the databases, and prepare for the arrival of provisional government representatives. "It's really over," Alara said softly, the full impact of their success beginning to register. Draco captured the weapons platforms, neutralized the Ghost Legion exposed and contained. "This chapter is over." Sol agreed, his tone cautiously optimistic. "What follows will be challenging in different ways. Rebuilding trust, reforming systems, ensuring transparency and accountability. But at least now, there's a chance for something better to emerge. Something worth fighting for." Alara added, thinking of all those who had sacrificed to reach this point. Mira Salen and countless others whose deaths had been part of Draco's machinations. The undying soldiers who had risked everything to expose the truth. Even those who had been deceived into supporting Draco's regime through manipulation and lies. A communication officer approached, interrupting their moment of reflection. "Captain Major, priority transmission from General Dax. She requests immediate conference." They moved to the secured communication station where Dax's image appeared on the display, her expression revealing satisfaction at the mission's success, tempered by the awareness of challenges still ahead. "Excellent work, both of you," she began, without preamble. "Confirmation of Draco's capture has already been transmitted to the provisional government. Combined with the neutralization of the weapons platforms and the evidence recovered from his data cores, we've effectively eliminated the immediate threat to Federation stability." "The Ghost Legion network," Saul inquired, addressing the broader security concern. "Being systematically contained," Dax assured him. "With Draco in custody and the command protocols under our control, most installations are standing down without resistance. Those few commanders still loyal to his cause lack the resources or support for sustained opposition." "And the political situation?" Alara asked, equally concerned about the governance vacuum that Draco's removal might create. The provisional government has called for Federation-wide elections within 6 months to establish legitimate long-term leadership, Dax reported. In the interim, a coalition council comprising military, civilian, and colonial representatives will oversee essential functions and begin implementing the reforms we've advocated for. It was the best outcome they could have realistically hoped for. Not a perfect solution to the Federation's deep-seated issues, but a genuine opportunity for healing and transformation. The path ahead would be complex, requiring vigilance and commitment to prevent the emergence of new forms of corruption or abuse, but the immediate existential threat had been overcome. What happens now? Sewell asked the question directed not just at their immediate next steps, but at the broader transition from resistance to reconstruction. Now, Dax replied with a faint smile. You both take some well-earned leave while the provisional government processes the evidence and prepares for Draco's trial. Your testimonies will be required eventually, but not immediately. I suggest using the time to rest and consider your roles in what comes next. The subtle emphasis on "consider your roles" was Dax's acknowledgement that they had choices to make, whether to formally reintegrate into military or governmental structures to continue working with the undying soldiers as it evolved into a watchdog organization, or to pursue entirely different paths now that their primary mission was complete. Understood, General. Alara responded formally, though her glance at Sewell communicated the private understanding between them, that their considerations would be joint ones, their future paths connected. Transport will arrive within 3 hours to begin prisoner transfer and evidence collection, Dax continued. You're both officially relieved of duty until further notice. And, she paused, her formal manner softening slightly. Thank you. What you've accomplished here has saved countless lives and given the Federation a second chance it desperately needed. The transmission ended, leaving them in the midst of the continuing activity around them, yet somehow apart from it. A quiet eye in the storm of transition, a moment to acknowledge the completion of a journey that had begun 7 years ago with Saul's apparent death and Alara's refusal to accept comfortable lies. So, Saul said after a moment, that leave the General mentioned. Any thoughts on how to spend it? Alara smiled, the expression genuine and unguarded, in a way it hadn't been since before the Red Dawn battle. I seem to recall something about a cabin on Nebulon 5. Might be a good place to consider our roles in what comes next. Might be, Saul agreed, returning the smile. Though I should warn you, my construction skills are probably rusty after 7 years of infiltrating secret military organizations and overthrowing corrupt regimes. We'll manage, Alara assured him, the light-hearted exchange a welcome relief after the tension of recent events. Between your Ghost Legion training and my tactical expertise, I'm sure we can figure out how to build a decent cabin. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of the security team leader, who reported that all primary objectives had been accomplished, and the facility was fully secured. They returned to their duties assisting with the final preparations for the provisional government's arrival, ensuring all evidence was properly documented and preserved, and debriefing cooperative facility personnel, who could provide additional insights into Ghost Legion operations. The work was important, but held a different quality than their previous desperate efforts. It was the methodical process of securing victory, rather than fighting against overwhelming odds of beginning to build, rather than struggling to prevent destruction. 3 hours later, as promised, the provisional government transport arrived, a substantial vessel with appropriate security measures for high-value prisoners and protected storage for sensitive evidence. Draco was transferred under heavy guard, his expression impassive, as he was led aboard already mentally preparing for the legal battles ahead, rather than wasting energy on futile resistance. With their primary responsibilities completed and formal handover accomplished, Alara and Sewell found themselves aboard a separate transport vessel, departing the facility that had been Draco's last stronghold. Through the viewports, they watched it recede against the backdrop of stars, a physical representation of the chapter now closing in their lives. Where to? The pilot asked, as they reached open space awaiting final destination coordinates. Saul looked to Alara, a question in his expression. She nodded slightly, confirming their shared understanding. Nebulon 5, Saul instructed, his voice holding quiet certainty. Northern Continent Lake District. As the transport adjusted course and prepared for faster-than-light travel, Alara and Saul stood together at the viewport, watching the stars elongate into brilliant streaks as the ship accelerated. It was a familiar sight from countless military deployments, yet now it carried new meaning. Not a journey toward conflict or duty, but toward possibility and the future they had fought to make possible. "Do you think he was right?" Alara asked quietly, referring to Draco's final warning about the vacuum his removal would create. About what comes next, potentially being worse. Saul considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. He was right that the Federation had deep problems before he took power, he acknowledged. But his solution, centralized control elimination of dissent weapons targeting civilian populations, would have created something far worse than what he claimed to be preventing. Whatever challenges come next, at least now, there's a chance for transparent solutions for collective wisdom, rather than unilateral force. And if those transparent solutions fail, she pressed not from pessimism, but from the pragmatic awareness that had kept her alive through years of covert resistance. If old patterns reassert themselves or new threats emerge, then we'll be there, Saul replied simply. Not as soldiers this time perhaps, but as citizens committed to the ideals the Federation was founded on. The undying soldiers began as a response to specific corruption, but its principles, accountability, transparency, protection of civilian lives and rights, those will remain relevant regardless of what form future challenges take. Alara nodded, finding comfort in his perspective, and in the understanding that their fight for justice hadn't been an endpoint, but rather a beginning. The creation of space where better systems could be built, where healing could occur, where the sacrifices of those lost would serve as foundation rather than footnote. But first, she said, a smile touching her lips, that cabin. First, the cabin. Saul agreed, his hand finding hers, as the stars streamed past, carrying them toward whatever waited beyond the horizon of their long struggle. Peace, perhaps, or purpose of a different kind, but most certainly a future they would face together, no longer separated by deception or duty, or the vast, cold emptiness of space. As the transport vessel entered faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the Ghost Legion facility, and all it represented, Alara felt something she had almost forgotten during 7 years of grief and resistance. Hope, not just for justice or victory, but for joy and connection and the simple pleasure of building something rather than fighting to prevent destruction. She had knelt at Saul's grave and whispered her regret at not saving him, unaware that he stood behind her alive. Now, they moved forward together, neither needing to save the other, but rather walking side by side toward a future they had both risked everything to make possible, not just for themselves, but for all those who would inherit the Federation they had fought to redeem. The stars continued their dance outside the viewport, constant, yet ever-changing, much like the challenges that would undoubtedly arise in the days and years ahead. But for this moment in this vessel, bound for Nebulon 5, there was only the certainty of having done what was right, the comfort of standing beside someone who understood the cost of that rightness, and the quiet anticipation of what might grow in the space they had created through their shared courage and unwavering determination. It was enough. After everything they had endured, it was more than enough.